Good morning, Canada time. I believe it's afternoon or evening everywhere else. I'm Lisa Hanna. I'm one of the global strategic leaders, and I'll be attempting to host this session with Natasha Hilton helping me in the background, poking me with a sharp stick to make sure I do all the things that I'm supposed to do. Quite out of fear of Vivian, who might fly over and chase me. There's lots of things going on, isn't there? I mean, last night was amazing. This morning was amazing. I've had 3 cups of coffee. We've got a big day ahead of us yet to come. We have not mentioned the Menti code, have we, Natasha? No, I don't think we have. Do remember that Menti code. We'll make sure we put it in the chat. We've got a bunch of other things we're supposed to remember. Let me check my cheat sheet. I must always have a cheat sheet. Tweet if you're on the tweeter. If you're on Insta, put some stuff on there. But do make sure you use hashtag WomenEd, hashtag disrupt, hashtag innovate, and hashtag change. We will make sure those go in the chat as well. We've got lots of things to share with you throughout the day, and we will make sure as well that they get in the chat. Our hosts from this morning's session were prepared. They investigated the panelists and speakers on Twitter and their histories, and they are so wonderful. Dear presenters, I have not done that. You have your own voices and your own seats at the table, and you are capable women, and can introduce your darn selves if you don't mind. First up, though, we have, I will say your names if I can. Dr. Joanne Bowser-Angerman and Elizabeth Draper, who are going to look at intergenerational women's influence, voices, and visibility. I'm very excited to learn about the intergenerational part. So without further ado, that's French, you know, being Canadian. Thank you for coming, and we're looking forward to what you have to say.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that introduction, Lisa. Thank you. And hi, everybody. Welcome. I hope you've been having such a brilliant day so far. And me and Elizabeth are really excited to be able to talk to you all today. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to our talk, which we've entitled Amplifying Intergenerational Women's Influence, Voices and Visibility Through Knowledge Exchange. Because this is exactly what we do together. We see this as ingredients for success through our experience. And this is our story together, and how we sort of connected, and how you guys can take this model forward yourselves. Myself working as a younger woman in higher education, and Elizabeth working as an older woman in the FE sector, so the further education sector, and our unique higher education and further education interprofessional exchanging, strengthening the network that we have across the sectors. And it's not just about finding like-minded women in your own institutions or in your own sector, but it's about how you connect across sectors as well. So our presentation is about our story, which can act as a model. As Lisa said, my name's Dr. Jo Bowser-Angerman, and I am currently Deputy Head for Education at Anglia Ruskin University, which is in the southeast of the UK, so Essex. I'm an Essex girl, if anyone's ever heard of that. And I'm passionate about teaching and learning. And I actually started off as a primary school teacher, and I've taught all the key stages, all the age ranges, all the way through to GCSE English and English resits in further education, and now I teach in higher education. So it's my research that I've done, my PhD research into GCSE research students, which connected me to Elizabeth, and now we've started to work together. So and it's our shared passion, really, which you'll probably get from this, but I'll let the fabulous Elizabeth introduce herself.
Okay, hello, thanks for that, Jo. Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I've worked for over 30 years in further education, sixth form colleges and further education colleges as an English teacher, head of English and director of English. And I've also been involved in student action research. And it was through that student action research and the interest in GCSE research that I connected with Jo. And I have been very interested in promoting and amplifying the work of younger women as well as of women generally. And particularly my own interest is the advocating of a change in the English curriculum with a specific focus on post-16. But that is where Jo and our paths connected. I'll just leave it there for now and go back to Jo.
No problem. So I just want to share with you IRL, which I'm sure many of you know means in real life. So I ask you to think about what that phrase really means, because Elizabeth and I didn't actually meet in real life, and yet we did. It was just real online, like we are right now. And it's what became real life for all of us, but that didn't mean that collaboration had to stop, because we met during the global pandemic. But the way we've been working together, you'd think we'd known each other for years, but we haven't. We met during that global pandemic, where we were literally under lockdown in the UK during the dark and gloomy months. But it was a distillation, a distortion of what real life actually is, and an interesting way of working, because we didn't have all the normal distractions. We didn't even have to be distracted with travelling from where Elizabeth is near Manchester to where I am in Essex. So it meant we couldn't meet in real life, and yet we did. And it meant that we could still collaborate, sometimes even more than we could have normally, because we didn't have all those travel disruptions, etc. So for us, we did meet in real life, but we found the incredible power in women working intergenerationally. And I would actively encourage younger women to seek out older women, to connect and bond over shared goals, shared passions, to continue the legacy on and build those connections together. And that's exactly what I did when I connected with Elizabeth. And I'm just sharing with you the original message that I sent Elizabeth. So this is the first one. And it's about recognizing the role of serendipity. The opportunities are out there for you to find them and go and get them. And this is the first contact. And the reason I even heard about Elizabeth was because of another female colleague, Paulette Luff, who I worked with at Anglia Ruskin University. She was watching Elizabeth at a Unconference, the Collaborative Action Research Network. And she was watching Elizabeth present and then messaged me and said, "You need to contact this woman, Elizabeth. You two are on the same page. You are singing from the same hymn sheet. You need to contact her." And so I thought, why would Elizabeth want to talk to me? Why would she want to connect to me? So I plucked up the courage and I thought, no, I'll send her a direct message in Twitter and just see what she did. And that's exactly what I did there on the 25th of November 2020, of October, sorry, 2020. And you can see how quickly Elizabeth responded to me, and I was so taken aback that she did. And you can see from what she's saying there how she encourages me to be braver in the workplace and be stronger. Because when I finished my PhD, I didn't want to pick it back up again. It terrified me. If anyone in this call has completed a PhD, I left mine in the cupboard because I was too scared to pick it back up again, and I was really struggling after I completed it. And Elizabeth, her response there telling me, "I wonder if you've shared these findings with the Department for Education." She's gone automatically to the biggest people I could connect to and encouraging me to do that. And And then from that, we had an email exchange where she asked to see my PhD, and she took the time to go through it and read it. And this led to then our online collaboration. So she absolutely encourages me to be bigger and braver. And now I love my PhD again, and that is mainly because of her. I'll pass over to you now, Elizabeth.
Okay, so yeah, so I mean, it was really amazing to encounter Jo and then develop this working relationship. And as you can see, that's a continuing correspondence. And at the same time as meeting Jo, I became a trustee of the English Association, which is all part of my own interest in terms of reshaping and rethinking the English curriculum. And we just wanted to put across the message about how important networks are, really. So from this, I said to Jo, we need to write a book, we need to do stuff, we need to work together. And Jo was really up for that. So I initially said, okay, well, let's start a rolling journal together to then kind of suss out our ideas and our thinking and see where it takes us. So is it the next slide, Jo?
Yeah, so then you've got me responding to Elizabeth and celebrating our achievements together. So then I could, you know, feed off of her, you know, success and what she's doing, and then same vice versa. That's encouragement and working together. And this is what it's like having someone like Elizabeth. This is what she does, surrounding yourself with women like this. And this is a particular strength of the age gap, I think, that we have as women, where she empowers me based on her experience, her networks, and she brings me along with her. So for her to come to me and say, let's write a book, let's start this rolling journal, she's bringing me along with her in a way that I didn't have that inner confidence to do. So I would urge everyone to go and get their own version of an Elizabeth to help them to do that. She's not competitive. She realizes that we're stronger together, and that's really, really powerful.
And so one of my whole big things is you've got to be willing to throw your hat in the ring. And I think we've seen from all the talks today and yesterday, that's absolutely what's been going on. And that's what I was encouraging Jo to do as well, because I thought, okay, let's do some writing together. Let's start this rolling journal. And this rolling journal idea was inspired by Rob Smith from Birmingham City University, with whom I was already working because I'd been asked to contribute to a book that's been published by Routledge, again about the English curriculum across education, all sectors, with my own sector being further education, which I feel very passionately about and want to raise the profile of, by the way. And I suddenly was thinking, and I thought, hang on a minute, I need to get Jo in with this. So I contacted her and said, Jo, do you want to co-write this chapter with me? Because I thought, here we've got a younger woman, PhD, doctor, worked in FE, worked with GCSE research students, knows all the fraught stuff to do with that. And do you know what? It'd be so great for her and I to work together writing this book. And she went, yes. Next slide. So yeah, so through Zoom, emails, WhatsApp, Twitter, and indeed this rolling journal, we started our whole process of collaborating together, initially to co-write this chapter. Next slide. And so this was just what I wrote to Jo about this rolling journal, saying that we just ping it back and forth, and then from that find sort of diamonds within it to then put into the chapter. And the first exchange you can see there, obviously the imperative for me is all about the English curriculum, so I'm quoting T.S. Eliot there, but just really sort of saying we need to try and work together to campaign and explore how the English curriculum, especially the GCSE research, can be changed, and breaking with traditions, disrupting, innovating and creating change through this chapter writing initially. Next slide, Jo.
Yeah, so this is just then me responding to Elizabeth in this idea of this rolling journal, and then how we took the conversation forward. And what Elizabeth did brilliantly with me is she created a safe space for us to allow our passion to just flow. It wasn't judgmental. It was a safe space for us to really just explore and be innovative and inspiring each other to keep challenging and keep disrupting, as Elizabeth said, the sector of FE. And I just wanted to share with you, and I think Elizabeth's going to come in on this slide as well, but I just wanted to share with you this question: what would a man do? And I ask you all to consider that question. What would a man do? And the reason I have this question in my mind is because of another female colleague I work with at the university. And she would always say this to me. So I'm quite young to be in the position I'm in my institution. And when I was being quite quiet in meetings, I would be inspired by this female colleague, again, who was an older lady, who said to me, what would a man do? You know, to force me to try and step forward. And it's stuck with me ever since, because what would a man do? And do we necessarily want to do what a man would do? Or do we want to find our own way? And I think we must, as professional women, is to challenge and change and disrupt and elbow our way in and share those opportunities. And this is happening as our story, mine and Elizabeth, testifies, but the struggle still continues. And it's the power that Elizabeth gives me as the confidence as an older female mentor for me to look up to.
Yes, and I think also we've got a quote there from Paula Marshall about the importance of going back and drawing on history and the past and learning from that. And so in the intergenerational relationships, part of that is going on as well. But there is something incredibly powerful of women working together, as Women Ed demonstrates. And there was another quote I wanted to include, which is, better to light a candle than curse in the darkness. And I think that's what we're all doing, actually, but sometimes you do need to have a bit of cursing, as we know. But that quote was in the beginning of a book that Professor Sarah Gilbert and Dr. Catherine Green co-wrote, and the book's called Vaxxers, and they were part of the AstraZeneca team, and they were working together with a team, obviously, for the vaccine, but they were sort of drawing on that quote, which interestingly was Anon, and as we all know, Anonymous was a woman. So there's really, it's the power of older women and younger women working together, but also the power of us standing on the shoulders of other women as well, and acknowledging and referencing that as we go along. Okay, next slide.
And this is why I think it's so important. So I just wanted to sort of contrast the use of language to describe similar leadership characteristics and the differences between men and women. So you can see here that a male leader is often described as strong, assertive, competent, analytical, level-headed, whereas a woman with similar characteristics in leadership is more likely to be described as bossy, emotional, loud. And I think I remember Natasha saying earlier about being loud and having that similar personality traits, but how they're perceived so differently. And one way we can try and break through this is, like Elizabeth saying, standing on the shoulders of other women. It's about making links with other women intergenerationally as well, passing on that experience, those connections, ideas, knowledge, and this will help women to have those spaces and places to feel entitled to speak up and speak out, just the way a man would as well. So Elizabeth and I are learning carefully and respectfully with each other. And this is something I think higher education and further education need to do in general across sectors. So the schooling sector working with colleges, and colleges working with universities, I think is really important. And so I think it's just sort of us finishing off really, and sort of bringing this back up again, and how it will act as a positive model to show the power of women working together intergenerationally. As I said, as Elizabeth as an older woman and myself as a younger one, interacting with that rich experience that we can both share and how we complement each other. What do you think, Elizabeth?
Yeah, and I also think, because I think it's definitely been said before, Rebecca Findlay was talking about women sort of continuing to raise hopes and share the work that we're all doing. And I think particularly older women have a place here to enable and advocate and support younger women, and also show through demonstration and experience what is possible, or how to navigate the tricky things that do inevitably, sadly, occur in relation to male power and misogyny. I think also that whole idea about being unapologetic. And I've referenced there Adrian Rich, who I think is absolutely brilliant, again, a poet, and that collection, I just love that title, A Wild Patience Has Taken Me This Far. And I think a lot of older women can probably really resonate with that title. And in fact, all women can, but I'm speaking as an older woman here. And that poem, Heroines, I really encourage everyone to read, because it's just a fantastic kind of expression and exposition of standing on the shoulders of other women historically from all different backgrounds, and then we end up where we are today, and you know, being brave in the workplace, and being brave in the workplace through, in part, amplifying the intergenerational influence of women and making their voices visible through knowledge exchange. So Jo and I are continuing our work together, and I'm really amazed and glad that we've done this all through lockdown. We have actually physically met now, and it was a bit like blind dates. We met on a bench in Cambridge, yeah, so we've met once, haven't we, Jo? Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I had a stark realization right at the beginning that I was the older female. Like, boom. Oh, wait, you're talking about me. Elizabeth, when you said you'd been in education for over 30 years, I went, oh, wait, same as me. So I think it's our duty and to work with younger women. That's what the idea is about. When we rise, we lift others. You know, when we get to a pinnacle in our careers, we have to turn around and send the elevator back down, or give a helping hand back up. Something twigged in my brain though, and what would a man do? You know, that's a very curious question. More than once I've tweeted to female politicians in particular who align themselves with parties that don't often have women's best interests in mind, asking them, like, why are you with this party? You know, and I often remind those politicians, thanking them for reminding me that women are not the gentler, better, you know, people, that we're fallible as men. But I think for me, I have to be careful if I start asking myself that question, what would a man do? Because sometimes they don't do it the right way at all. And I think many of our countries being run by white men are doing the poorest, at least when it comes to COVID as an example. But that's going to stick with me for a very long time, that question, because I can see where, oh, a man might speak up here and I didn't. That's a challenge I need to accept. But I think there's some caution around that as well.
Yeah, it's a controversial touch paper question. Yeah,
for sure.
Touch paper question. Yeah.
Now Vivian is joining us as well, back from holiday. She'll be helping me along here today. Vivian, good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted to be able to join in now. And thank you, Elizabeth and Joanne, because you know, we don't get a lot of FE people and HE people joining in. So you're blazing the trail, which is absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for that. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
It's our pleasure. Shall I move on, Lisa?
Yes, and I will take some co-host people off, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay.
can I just, before I introduce our next speaker, we've put in the chat our Menti question link. So over the course of this session or the weekend, we'd love you to answer those 4 questions. They're all about how you can disrupt, innovate and change things. And it will give us a really good feel across the weekend for what our women-led community feels about what changes we can make. Hello, I'd like to introduce Hayley. Hello, Hayley.
Hello.
Hello, very nice that you could join us.
Thank
And
you so much
Hayley,
for having me.
you're talking about why you as a woman teach an all boys class.
I am indeed. I will just share my screen with you.
Super, we're looking forward to this, Hayley. Over to you then.
Lovely. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Great. So as a quick introduction, my name is Hayley Draper and I am part of the extended leadership team at Kingsdock College in Northamptonshire. And we are a large mainstream school and I teach English and it is my passion and I love it. And I started teaching an all boys class. We are in our 4th academic year now of the all boys English class for Key Stage 4. And I want to sort of touch base with you about why this even started, why it originated. I have always had, I don't know, maybe a desire to plug gaps where I see them. And the attainment gap between boys and girls in English is ever growing. So in 2018, the gap between boys and girls achieving that grade 4 or C grade pass was 13.3%. However, the year before it was only 10%, and the year before that it was only 9%. So our gap just keeps increasing. And as the girls continue to flourish, the boys are being left behind. And you only have to look around the staff room for English to see why that might be the case. We are a female-dominated subject. And where I am at the moment, there are a team of around 12 of us. We have 2 male teachers. At my previous school, there were 17 English teachers. We had 1 male trainee. So the boys aren't really seeing themselves in the staffing of this. You know, we've spoke a lot today about that visibility and being able to see women, but also it's women being able to fill that role for the boys that are in front of us. In 2021, actually more women have been accepted to university than men. So what we're seeing is an opportunity for women to give a voice to the men of the future as well, and start thinking about how we can shape that. So this hasn't been a new case. It's not just since 2016 that we've seen this gap growing. This has been going on for over 30 years now. And I saw an opportunity to do something that I won't lie, I really wanted to do. I took on a class of year 10 students and there were only 3 girls in the class. They were losing their place in that room because the boys were so loud. They didn't have a voice in there. And so the initial opportunity came about to give those girls an opportunity somewhere else. And with the girls moving out of the class, it seemed like an organic way to begin a boys' intervention for English. Now, I'd seen it before. This wasn't something that had just come to me. I'd seen it take place in 2 different schools. In my first school, this boys' class was taught by the head teacher. He was an English teacher and he was extraordinary. It was a group of 8 boys. They were described as the master class because it was taught by the headmaster, and they made phenomenal progress. And so I saw this as, this is exactly what I want my class to be, something very scholarly, something very academic. And I went on to a new school and they said, actually, we're pioneering a boys' class. I was like, great. They said, you know, someone's already going to be teaching it this year and we'll see how it goes. It didn't work out the same way. There were 12 students in there. The teacher was female. She was a leader in the subject. She was a very strong, very capable teacher. But they had a different curriculum experience to the rest of the year group. So whilst we went on teaching a book called Maggot Moon, which is phenomenal by Sally Gardner, the boys were learning something else. Their whole lesson was sort of centered around football and gaming and things that were stereotypically masculine. And unfortunately, what happened in that class was that a toxic masculinity started to grow in there, where the boys knew that they were different and they took that in a very negative, very masculine way and trying to assert dominance. So I'd seen two different versions of this event and I wanted to see what I could do. I sort of drawing on the experiences that I'd already seen. Now, what was important is establishing those routines and fundamentals, the non-negotiables at the very beginning, because the last thing I wanted was to fail the kids. And so from the very beginning, it was about high expectations, teaching the boys like I would teach the girls. They were my only, and still I only have one all boys class. And yet my lesson is the same way as if it was mixed ability. It was about cutting out the gimmicks. Just because they're boys doesn't mean that this is the only way to teach them. If we're not giving them that breadth of curriculum, actually what we're doing is creating a problem that doesn't need to be there in the first place. We spend hours toiling and toiling over our curriculum design because it's good. And it's important that all children get the same opportunity. I don't want to say, oh, actually, you're in this class and we're going to be doing something different. Because what that sends the signal to the students is we're doing something different because we're not capable of what the others are doing. And that was absolutely not the message that I wanted to send. Despite, sort of the stereotypical idea that boys love to be competitive, that can actually be quite a damaging situation. And so there's no in-class competition. It was so important that we work collectively as a team and build a dynamic that is strong. And so when we are competing, we compete with ourselves and with our class average, because that means that everyone drives it up. And we create a really supportive sort of atmosphere. To begin with, I think the students saw it as sort of sarcasm or an overreaction when you would praise someone for doing a good job. And actually that's become a really healthy part of the lesson. You'll hear students saying to each other, that was a really good idea. And what began as sort of mimicking me has become one of the most lovely parts of the lesson, seeing each other support the other students that perhaps wouldn't normally speak up. So that has been really, really wonderful. And it's also about having that mutual respect. When I go into the classroom, I greet the students, they greet me. It's the little things that start to build up. And when you've got a class dynamic, you then have to foster and care for it. Because if you stop, then that does fall apart. And it's the little things where you know students as individuals, where you know their interests and you show that you care about them, not just about their grades. Because what they're looking for is that genuine part of you that you're prepared to share with them. Banter. Now, banter is banned. It's one of my non-negotiables. Banter is a word they're using for what is ultimately one of four categories. It's something misogynistic, it's something homophobic, it's crude and sexual, or it's bullying. Now, this doesn't mean that we can't have a laugh, and there are things where humour will come about, but that's not the same as banter. So it's really important to have the flexibility to laugh at yourself. And this week I lost the remote to my projector, a little thing, and The students then used my own language about expectations back at me. Miss, that wasn't very responsible. And the ability to be flexible and have a laugh is still there, and it creates that warm culture, but it's not banter. Everything is equal, and that's really, really important. Banter will come up. I'd love to say that at the beginning of the year, I set those expectations and no one has ever tried to cross the line. No one's come near it, but it wouldn't be true. But the important thing is that when these incidents do come up, that we don't shy away from it and we deal with it head on, because otherwise we're not reinforcing the expectations that we want of young men. So if there are issues that come up, and in English teaching, we cover all sorts of difficult topics. In one of the plays that we do in year 10, we tackle the issue of consent. Now, in a room of 15-year-olds, that's so, so important that we deal with that in a really mature manner. And so giving them the flexibility to ask questions, to give comments, to talk about what they know and explore that, means that we give a voice to those boys, but we're not doing it in such a way that we push them out for any views that they might have come to the classroom with, but that we explore how that moves forward in a way which is respectful, and where I feel like they will leave the classroom with a better understanding of those concepts. The student response to the class has been very good. To begin with, it was a novelty. They came into the class and they realised for themselves after the first year that they were in an all-boys class. And the group has been quite harmonious for the most part. They go to revision sessions now and we sit together as a class. And I go to the revision session, I sit on their table with them. It's about showing that I am part of the team. Yes, I'm the leader of the team, but I'm there with them working together. It's not a me versus them. We have to work collectively. And sharing that same narrative lesson after lesson is really important, that they see it's not me as a woman and them as boys, but us working together. And what it's resulted in is some really good knock-on effects. So the students said that they like the people in their class. They're all a bunch of boys, but they're not all the same kind of person. There's a variety of different personalities, and yet they've found something in common where they can work together. They talk about enjoying the lessons. Is it that they enjoy English and they've got a passion and they're going to pursue it at university? I would love to say yes, but it's not for everyone. But they enjoy the feeling of coming to the lesson, the atmosphere in there, and they feel like they're doing well. And we all know that we are more motivated when we feel like we are successful. There is nothing better than coming out of some classroom or even in our day-to-day jobs and feeling like, yeah, I really got something out of that and I am doing well for myself. But the knock-on effect in other classes has been really interesting. Because a lot of the disruptive students are in that class, there is more airtime for the students in the other classes. So where we've got sort of quieter students, they have got the opportunity to flourish, to really do well in a quieter atmosphere. Now, it's not to say that there are no quiet boys in my class. There are, and I think we couldn't behaviour because the dynamic would be completely different. It's about showing that there are all different kinds of people and that we need to respect and have time for all of them. You're learning to embrace our differences. A lovely thing came up this week where we sat down to revision and a boy shook hands with another boy from my class, completely different worlds apart, and said, "It's an honour to sit with you today." It was just a strange little exchange, but it shows that they've really got this respect for one another that has grown through this class. this is something that I didn't expect to come up from the class. The students that are the hardest to reach are the ones that are desperate to be there. Over the last 2 weeks, these are 3 quotes that I've had. I don't feel well, so I'm going home after English. I know I'm late, but I made it in for English. I didn't want to miss another English lesson. This is a student that's been off all week. And these are the students that all career we've seen really struggle to engage, who have really become disenchanted with school, starting to feel like there is a place for them. Because when they're in this collective, they're part of a team and they work together, and we're all trying to drive up that average. And so they know that they're an integral cog in that machine. It gets tough. It is not easy all of the time, and Lord knows, and my colleagues will tell you, sometimes I'm tearing my hair out and I think, God, why have I done this to myself for another year? And it's that moment where I have to have humility. I'm not Wonder Woman, and I've got to check my own ego sometimes. There are a multitude of teachers that could run that class, and if the students were in any of their classes, they could do just as well. So it's also about doing what's right even when it's hard. And some students, the class just doesn't work for them. It's not their sort of atmosphere, it's not got the right vibe. And knowing that they can leave that class and do well somewhere else is something where I need to move on from thinking like it's a personal failure on my part. Every class is different, every student is different, and we need to embrace those moments where we say, actually, somewhere else is a better fit. And that's no reflection on me, and it's no reflection on them. And the boys' class is just another class, and we have to remember that. So the lessons that I've really learned from this, it's about being a positive role model, about showing up, being there, someone consistent that the boys can rely on to come in day after day and give it another go. Because after those tough lessons, I'm still going to see them the next day. So giving everyone a fresh start is really important. Catching and being good, short-term rewards are amazing, because that quick moment of I'm successful and my teacher knows it is such a huge win for them. About making parental contact. In that first moment where a student shows me, I know that I could do well here, I call home. Let their parents know, because it might be the only call they get this year that is positive. There's too much in schools where we just call home when there's a problem. And making that first positive phone call means that if there is something tough that comes up, they're much more likely to have time to listen, because they know that you've taken the time to know them personally in the first place. And our hardest to reach students are the ones that need us the most. I want to leave you with one beautiful incident that happened on Tuesday. One of my year 11 students was sat in detention. We have centralised detentions. And one of my year 10 students was also sat in there. And I turned to the year 11 student and said, this is you a year ago. You are so similar. And the year 10 student went, why? And the year 11 boy turned to him and said, you must be sick at English as well. So there are always the positives for teaching the all boys class. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hayley. Thank you. Would you like to stop sharing? Super. Thank you very much. I loved all of the suggestions of take the gimmicks away. I think that's absolutely key, isn't it? High expectations, and I loved get rid of banter. Laughs, yes. Banter, no. Fabulous, Hayley. Thank you so much. And hello to our next speaker. I am personally honoured to introduce Yamina Bibi. Been supporting and helping and working with Yamina for quite a while now, and I miss her smile. So it is so lovely to see you. And Yamina, what are you talking to us about?
I'm going to talk about how I'm beginning and learning to tackle that inner critic, which was, I think, the first thing I spoke about in one of the Unconferences in London. So it's exciting to, it feels almost a bit full circle.
That'd be super.
Sorry, I'm happy to see your face, that's all it is.
You okay sharing your screen, yes?
Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Brilliant. Ready?
Yes, off you go.
Hi everyone, I'm Yamina Bibi, and I'm a Women-Ed London network leader and an assistant head teacher at the wonderful Sarah Bennell School, where we hosted the last face-to-face Women-Ed London conference, and hopefully next year too, fingers crossed. So today I'm going to be talking about how I'm learning to tackle my inner critic and hopefully share some strategies that have helped me to minimize the impact and influence of that unkind inner critic. Before Women-Ed, my inner critic would rage against me. You're not good enough. You're not posh enough. You're not competent enough. You're not intelligent enough. You're a failure. You're not an expert. You cannot be a senior leader. That inner critic told me that speaking openly about my areas of development with my colleagues would destroy my career. Yep, destroy my career. And it would reiterate what I believed my colleagues might already think about me, that I wasn't competent enough or good enough to be a leader. And that no matter how many times people told me that I was good enough, I just struggled to believe it. Last night, funnily enough, scrolling through Twitter, I came across this tweet by Kelly, who's a mental health and well-being consultant. This really resonated with me because I have the tendency to be all of these imposter types, particularly during my career, and even more so as I move into senior leadership. Even though over the last few years, Women-Ed and through coaching, I've been able to really minimize the impact of my inner critic, starting a new school this year and new role this year has meant that type 1, 4, and 5 are beginning to be a bit louder and louder and are trying to impact me and influence me once again. Luckily, I have had the help of so many amazing women who have supported me in tackling my inner critic and helped me interrupt my tendencies. Let me show you who they are. Ta-da! And you may recognize these amazing, inspiring women because they've all played and they have played a significant role in my leadership story, and they play such a significant role in so many of us at Women-Ed. Buki Yusuf, Hannah Wilson, and Vivian Porritt have helped me over the last few years and share some strategies that have really supported me and enabled me to actually come back to and rely on time and time again when my inner critic starts to get louder and louder. Let me tell you more about them. I was inspired by the lovely Buki, as she was the first visibly Muslim woman I saw on EduTwitter and in Women-Ed. And when I discovered that I could actually have her as my coach for the DFE's Women Leading Education coaching program, I leapt at the chance. Yes, that's the word, leapt. And having Buki in my life as a coach has forced me really to see myself in a different light. Buki has asked me to consider really deep questions about how I saw myself, who I am, and what I do. Through Buki's coaching, I've realized that actually I am competent. One of the strategies that Buki shared with me is to make a note of my successes and also about what I want to achieve later on. So I still, years on, have that notebook, and at the back of it, I write down all my achievements and also my learning so that I can come back to it time and time again as a reminder of all that I have achieved and all I have yet to achieve. Buki has also helped me with my public speaking, and I know a lot of people think that I'm just confident, and I know that comes across, which is great, because Buki has helped me and supported me through coaching to showcase my confidence. Before I met Buki, I would be a bag of nerves, I'd be shaking, and I would actually sometimes even be sick. And this impacted not just speaking in public at conferences, but also even in my teaching everyday life, speaking up in meetings and engaging with others too. My inner critic would tell me time and time again that nothing I'd said or did was of value or of importance. Well, I'm going to repeat now what Buki told me. I'm gold dust, and so are you. And what we have to say is of value and is of importance. Here's another phenomenal woman, the lovely Hannah Wilson, who is also a co-founder of Women Ed. In the last couple of years, particularly through the Resilient Leaders Element coaching program and through Diverse Ed, Hannah has actually helped me become more aware of my areas of strength and actually deliberately focus on those areas that I would like to develop in, and I wanted to develop in. As a result of Hannah's coaching, I'm no longer obsessed with being the expert leader or the superwoman leader, because that doesn't really exist. I don't want to be the person who knows everything and can do everything, because what kind of role model am I? It's not sustainable. And actually what I've realized now, and I've noticed now, is that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. And as Brené Brown says, rumbling with vulnerability will get us to courage. And actually by me seeking support and asking for the support that I need from those trusted leaders around me, I'm also modeling to others around me that it's okay to do the same. And part of me tackling and quieting my inner critic has been to acknowledge, as Hannah Wilson says, it's not bragging if it's based on facts and evidence. And so when Queen Vivian, yes, Vivian, you're queen in my eyes, when Queen Vivian wanted to nominate me for Rising Stars Award earlier this year, I was shocked, and my inner unkind voice started to rage against me once again. But Vivian's support and advocacy has empowered me to recognize my achievements. And so now I am proud to say that I not only was nominated for the We Are the City Rising Star Award for Education Academia, but hey, look, I won it, woo! And before I would have been embarrassed to acknowledge it, but I'm not anymore, because it's not bragging or arrogant to acknowledge your successes. For me, it's a reminder for me and myself, for others as well too, that I am good enough and that we are all great enough. Acknowledging my successes alongside that has also been about thinking about how I spend my time and energy. And I love this from Hannah Wilson and from Jazz and Pafar, about personal energy and fulfillment-fueled success. That's not a swear word, I promise. It's not an acronym for a swear word. And one of the things that I love that Hannah did with us in a session called Regaining Your Mojo with the Resilient Leaders Elements is actually listing all the things that give me energy and that drain up my energy. And what I realized is that a lot of the things that I was spending my time and energy on, so instead of talking about time management, talking about energy management, I was spending my time and my energy on thinking about how to prove myself rather than improve. And I know Vivian says that quite a lot. And so now what I do is deliberately think about and list all the things that give me energy, and I spend more time doing that and think about what drains my energy, and I limit how much I do of those things. In addition to this, I used to always think that I'm just not good enough. It's who I am. I'm not a good decision maker. I'm not really resilient. I'm not this, I'm not that. But actually what I've noticed, and I did this course last year, and I did a lot of courses last year during lockdown, how I spent my time, but with the lovely Jazz and Pafar, you may know her, she's absolutely brilliant. And this course, Humans First Leadership course, introduced me to this notion of tendencies. I hadn't really thought about it, or I didn't know much about it. And so what I realized is that I actually have a tendency to compare myself to others. And that is triggered a lot by other things. And so noticing when I go from pressure to stress, noticing what my tendencies are, has been a really key way of me tackling that inner critic. So I'm now noticing, for example, and I use this box that Jazz shared with us to help me, particularly when I notice that I'm thinking that I'm not good enough, or when my inner voice gets, and that inner critic gets louder and louder. So what is it that I'm tending to think, and how do I feel? Well, I'm tending to think right now I'm not very good. I've started a new job, started a new role, and right now I don't know everything, which is okay, but it's what I'm tending to think right now. And what are my triggers? So maybe I made a decision that I wasn't quite happy with, or I've had to do something that I wasn't quite happy with. And then how does that show up? So noticing that has been really important for me. Well, I've noticed that it shows up by me working 12, 13, 14-hour days, sometimes staying up late at night to try and get all the things done, to try and be the expert leader or the superwoman leader. And as a result, and the consequence of that is that I'm just tired. And actually it becomes a cycle, because then I go, oh, that didn't really work. And oh, yep, that's it. That just proves that I'm not good enough. And in reality, the truth is I am. I absolutely am. And so are we all. And one of the things, and I don't know where I got this from, so I don't know who to give credit for, but some of the things I do for myself, and I suggest for others around me, is I do this grid where I write down how I'm feeling. And on the opposite side, I'll write down what I know. So it's based on evidence and data, and that knowledge has to be based on evidence and data. So if I'm right now, I'm feeling like I'm not good enough, I'll label it and I'll say, I notice right now that I'm feeling quite tired, or I'm noticing right now that I'm feeling like I'm a rubbish teacher and I'm not doing very well by my students. And then I'll say, what do I know? What is the evidence and data showing me? And what will I do as a result of that? Well, actually, okay, yes, I'm not feeling good enough right now. And actually, I'm thinking like, maybe I'm not very good at this job and I wasn't the right person for this job, which is madness. But on the other side, well, actually, no, I have to tell myself, I've led a number of successful teams. Okay, I'm not feeling like a very good teacher, feel like I'm letting my students down. Well, actually, my students gave me a shout out in assembly last week. And okay, right now I'm feeling quite overwhelmed. Maybe I need to make a list of a to-do list and a to-be list and start with that hardest thing and eat that frog, as they say. The how do I feel and what do I know? And that's really helped me recently to interrupt those tendencies. Another thing that I do, and again, this is from the Humans First Leadership course, and it's online, by the way, if you want to have a look at it, is that awareness of self and noticing when I am feeling like that and actually doing things about it, doing something about it rather than just letting it take over and influence me. And something that Jazz says is that these tendencies aren't who we are. I say I'm not a very good decision maker, but actually these are the thoughts that I'm having about myself. And they become our feelings, and then the beliefs that we have about ourselves, the things that we say about ourselves, which then shows up in our actions, and they become our tendencies. And then we believe that this is who we are, when the truth is, these are our tendencies, these are our thoughts. And if we can interrupt those tendencies, then actually we can really limit the impact and influence that this inner critic has. So interrupt those tendencies by being intentional and focusing on what the evidence and data is showing, rather than focusing on those thoughts and feelings, immediate thoughts and feelings. I love this one of creating to-be lists as well as to-do lists. And Jazz talks about us being human beings, not humans doing. And I love that. And that's really changed the way in which I think about myself and who I am and what I do. And alongside what I've got to do, I also write down why I have to do it. So I'm tying my to-do list to actually why. What's the purpose of me? What's of me doing this particular thing? And why do I have to do it? And stopping fear driving my bus. We need to stop allowing fear drive our bus. And Diana Asagi says, even if you feel fear, which is absolutely fine because I'm scared right now, feel the fear and do it anyway. Feel the fear and do it anyway. And I think that's a Susan Scott quote. And that idea of attitude of gratitude, being grateful, and that's really helped me, is writing down a list of all the things I have to be grateful for, writing down all the successes of the week or the term so far, and then also thinking about what I've learned as well, so that I can go back to that and constantly go back to that, almost like my guidebook. And so finally, how has that impacted on me then, my leadership story? And I shared this last week with the Women-Ed London event that we had, and they told me off because they said it wasn't, I didn't pause at it. So I'm going to pause now and let you have a look. Why am I talking about this? Why am I showing you this? Well, now my inner voice, when it begins to get louder and louder and it tries to influence me, I am able to use some of these strategies to help me limit its influence on me. So that even when I feel the fear, I do it anyway. Before, I would have cringed at showing you the Rising Star Awards or even showing you my leadership timeline. But now I hope that in doing so, I hope you can notice that the impact that coaching and Women-Ed has had on me, and particularly on limiting the influence that my inner critic has. And I now know that this is not showing off, it's acknowledging my successes, because it's not bragging if it's based on facts. So why not create a timeline for yourself to help you limit the influence of your imposter syndrome that you may have and that inner critic on you? Because as Bucky says, we're all gold dust. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yamina. Super duper duper. So many phrases we could all pick out of that. But of course, I'm still focused on the rising star part of it. And you'll just keep rising and rising, in my view, and I'm sure everybody else's. We've got some super tweets and some super chat comments, and gold dust is the word everybody's held on to, which you absolutely are, my darling, absolutely are. Thank you.
Thank you
very much indeed. See you soon. Bye-bye. Right, we've tackled that inner critic now. Everybody lost that critic? Yes. And lose the apologetic language. Lots of you will know that I say that lots and lots of times. We have to get rid of it. We have to disrupt our own language, and we have to change the way we describe ourselves or what we say to others about ourselves. Be great to hear in the chat if any of you are able to be working on that and doing that. I'm getting a lot better at that. So it is something we can do if we just disrupt our own thinking. Thank you very much, Yamina. And I'm also delighted to welcome our next presenters, who are Laura Cooling and Rachel Watson. Are you there? I know you are. There you are.
Hi, we're here. We made it.
Absolutely fabulous, and joining us together, which is super. I first met Laura and Rachel on a Women Ed programme in Women Ed Northeast. So I'm really delighted to be flying the Northeast flag with you today. Absolutely super. What you are both talking about, being 10% braver, 100% braver, 10% braver goes global. Fascinating topic, can't wait. And over to you, Laura and Rachel.
Thanks, Vivian. I'm going to share the screen. Can we see that? Is that all right? Is it working? Okay, so
You make it big, right? That's it.
yes, so we're on. So I'm Rachel Watson, this is Laura Cooling. So we both work at Bishopton Crewe, which is part of the Tees Valley Collaborative Trust in the northeast of England. And for those people who are joining us from overseas on this global conference, a pupil referral unit is a provision for pupils who, for whatever reason, can't access mainstream school. So our pupils have a variety of social, emotional, mental health or behavioural needs. So this makes it incredibly challenging, incredibly rewarding, and it also means there is never a dull moment. So part of what we are going to be talking about is how we're working to change the narrative around alternative provision and what that means for the life chances of our pupils, but also that as a provision, we are quite a rarity in that our SLT is all female, and we have majority female middle leaders. And so we're disrupting the narrative of not only what it means to work in alternative provision, but what it means to be a woman in education. So we are constantly innovating in our very supportive and empowering environment.
Not only our SLT all female, they are all part-time as well, which I guess is practically unheard of.
Yeah. So we just wanted to share a little bit about our journeys and introduce ourselves before we get on to talking about how Women Ed has impacted us and the setting that we work within. So for me, I qualified in 2013 after doing an English degree. My English degree I did purely because I was good at it and had a brief moment of panic and now what? After doing some work experience in a school, I realised that it was the profession for me. I went through my PGC, NQT and RQT, and I want to shout out to Yamina and her fabulous session right now, because the idea of the inner critic really resonated with both of us. And at the time when I was training, I felt very much as though the narrative was around working long hours, and if you weren't seen to be staying up late at night and get up early in the morning and giving everything up, then you weren't working hard enough. So I constantly felt as though I wasn't working hard enough, I wasn't good enough, everybody had it figured out but me. I worked in mainstream education for 3 years, including my training year, and then I ended up working with Crew after a chance meeting with Rachel Campbell, who I think is watching us at the moment. And the rest is history. It was a leap of faith, a moment of bravery, and I began working in the Crew. However, I then felt I was coasting a little bit. So, Laura, your journey?
I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. From being tiny, from being in primary school, I always knew that was what I was going to do. But I always wanted to be a primary school teacher. And after leaving college, I did a little bit of work experience in a local primary school. And I quickly realised that that wasn't for me. I still knew I wanted to teach, but I knew that primary wasn't going to work for me. So then I went off and studied for my biology degree, took a year out. The reason for that was I didn't feel like I could teach 16-year-olds at only being 21 myself. So I had a year off, did my PGCE in 2004, qualified 2005, and then spent the next 10 years teaching across 2 different mainstream schools. For one reason and another, after that 10 years, I left teaching. I thought teaching was no longer the career I wanted to pursue, and left that for, I think it was around about 2 years. And then after that 2 years, I realised that I started to miss teaching, but I knew that mainstream wasn't where I wanted to return to. And I ended up, a bit like Rachel, chance, just a set of coincidences, and I ended up in a Crew setting, not the one I'm in now, as a maternity cover, and then I've ended up in Bishopton, which is where I am now.
And the rest was history. Okay, so what happened next for both of us? I think what both of our journeys had in common is that we experienced that feeling of coasting and being uncertain of where our career was going to go. I think especially as women, you learn pretty quickly that the narrative isn't that you go from your NQT year to your RQT and then middle leadership, senior leadership, and on, but there's multiple paths that you can take. However, I think both of us needed to take a little while to think about what our next path was going to be, and this is where Women Ed really helped us come into our own and consider what it was that we could offer and where we wanted to be, and really helped us to realise that if we want the path that we wanted to pursue, we had to carve out for ourselves through the difficult conversations with ourselves and with others. Be that SLT or having a stern word with your inner critic about how you're going to progress and what you want to do, what your ambitions are, and how to make that happen.
Yeah, that's right. We took part in the 2019 Women Ed 10% Braver course, and a lot of that course forced myself and Rachel and probably the other members of the course as well outside of our comfort zone. You know, Vivian was there. She made us do lots of really uncomfortable activities, talking about ourselves, our attributes. There was speed dating activities where we had to big ourselves up and really sell ourselves. We had to write personal statements, and it was really difficult, sort of, when you've never thought about yourself in that way, really trying to sell yourself and think, what do I actually bring to the table now? And as a result of one of those sessions, I went away and I started to list everything. I mean, by 2019, I've been teaching 15 years, and I started to list, what have I actually done in those 15 years that is going to help me progress? And once I started to create this list, it just started to flow. And by the end, I was actually surprised at how many additional things I'd done that I'd forgotten about. And that, you know, was going to help me on my way.
It's incredible. It was incredibly empowering in the 10% Braver sessions, being encouraged to write down your attributes and your strengths. And when you see it written down, it's quite an empowering feeling where you're like, well, why aren't I making the most of these opportunities? How can I, and how can I carve out the way for myself? And you found your love of data through that, which has led into your current role, which leads us on to how does it link to Women Ed? Because we've talked a lot about ourselves. It's been a bit of the Rachel and Laura show. But through our work, I mentioned at the beginning that we're trying to flip the narrative of what it means to work in an alternative provision and for the pupils who attend there. But then, as we are a majority female staff, we're trying to change the narrative of what it means to be women in education and constantly moving and innovating and empowering each other. We applied for this conference partly because we egg each other on, and it was a little bit of a dare to say, should we apply for this? Should we do it? Should we do it? And that's where the 100% Braver came from, because we could never imagine we would be here. But mainly we just felt that women's stories need to be told, because no two women in education have the same story. And we need, in order to silence that inner critic, we need to realise that everybody's journey looks different. Everybody has their own individual strengths that they can play to, and we need to celebrate those and collaborate with other women to develop them. And often throughout our journey, our impressions of what it means to be a teacher are formed by outdated stereotypes. I mentioned on Twitter earlier on about how a seminar that I attended during my PGCE, my training year, basically said, if you're in a relationship this year, it will fail. If you have friends or children, pets or family, you're never going to see them. And get a haircut that's easy to maintain, because you are never going to get time for yourself. And I think from that, that made me panic. And it's something I carried with me for a couple of years, thinking, does my career as a woman have a shelf life? Is it always going to be about sacrifice? Am I always going to have to consider, do I want to progress as a professional and as a leader, or do I want to have a life? So that's something we are trying to tackle, and we're trying to take control of our strengths and what we can offer. So that leads on to difficult conversations, Laura, and what we are doing now. Shall I go? Yes, because I've talked a lot and simply sounded my own voice, so I'll let you have a go.
So one of the activities in the Women Ed 10% Braver course was a mock interview, and as part of that, it was there was various different activities. It wasn't just the actual interview itself. One of the activities that we were carrying out was a data related task. Now, up until this point, data hadn't ever interested me. It was just something that I submitted termly into Sims and never really gave much thought to, other than where my class were at, etc. But after taking part in that data activity, I found that I really enjoyed it, and I was actually quite good at it. And it just so happened in the months that followed that our current data and assessment lead was leaving to take up another post. So I kind of ummed and ahed for a little bit, and then I plunked myself in the head's office and started that conversation. And now, 2 years later, I am our school's data and assessment lead. I've revamped the whole process of how we do that. And I've learned so much along the way. I've spent time in mainstreams with our mainstream colleagues, learning from those and bringing their ideas back. So from that course, I would never, if we hadn't have done that course, I would never have put myself in that position. I would never have put myself forward, because my inner critic would have always told me, you can't do that, you don't know enough about it. But I just thought I could do that little task, the rest I'll learn as I go. And I'm still learning, I don't know it all, but I'm doing my best, and that's all any of us can do. As well as taking on the data, I took on eco schools, and I achieved Green Flag award for our school. We got bronze, silver, and then green flag within a year. And I did pupil voice as well. I enjoyed the whole course of the Women Ed course so much that I contacted Vivian separately, and I'm also now the Women Ed North East Network lead, which is just amazing. I just love being surrounded by this group of women. They're so inspiring, so motivating, and I always come away from any chat with any of them fired up and ready to just take on new things. I've currently got my MPQ TL application in, and I'm due to start that at any moment, and I attribute that to Women Ed as well. I would never have put myself forward for something like that a couple of years ago.
On my part, it's quite similar. I left with the Women Ed sessions fired up and wanting to have those difficult conversations with SLT, and it's one of the most nerve-wracking things I've ever done in my life, going and putting myself in the office and saying, these are my strengths, this is what I'm good at, where do you see me in this provision? So we talked about that. I have a passion for literacy and reading pleasure, being an English teacher. So since then, I have been working on revamping how we incorporate reading across the curriculum. And that's something that I feel I work tirelessly on, and it's forced me into a leadership position where I have to direct other people, and I've got to see myself as the expert. And that's been such a learning curve that actually I am the expert and I do have something to offer, and it can make a difference. And throughout lockdown, things obviously changed for everybody during the pandemic. So I also ended up leading on our school's remote learning programme and becoming a Century Ambassador, which is something I'm now working to incorporate into day-to-day school life as more blended learning. I don't feel I'm particularly IT literate, so that's also been an act of bravery that I am constantly learning on the job, how Century Learning and Microsoft Teams work, and I'm constantly surprised by it. So I try to incorporate what I've learned into my day-to-day and use it to try and encourage and inspire others and have a whole school approach to not only bit bravery but personal development, which will pay off in our outcomes and in our pupils' outcomes, and just generally help us to develop the school further. I also, through 10% Braver, around about the time we put ourselves forward to be 100% Braver, applied for advanced teacher status. Unfortunately, I learned that week that it was unsuccessful, but we live and learn. And I have decided that I'm going to take the opportunity to use that time to come back stronger next year and reapply, because failure is part of learning. Brave, not perfect.
Okay.
So we want to talk a little bit about how Women Ed hasn't just impacted us, it's impacted our whole school. So we have a few quotes from people such as Rachel Campbell, Laura Hall and Ali Cholkat. I'm not sure who's watching this.
Since we did the Women Ed course back in 2019, the whole sort of Women Ed vibe and mantra sort of disseminates through the whole school. There's constantly conversations about Women Ed, empowering women,
encouraging each other.
We egg each other on and to push ourselves out of our comfort zone constantly. So yeah, I think from a couple of us doing that course, it's had a knock-on effect on the rest of the staff. Would you agree?
I definitely agree, and I love what Rachel Campbell has said about that she gets her strength and belief in what she's doing from the women around her, and the idea that empowered women empower women, and that by empowering each other we can be even more brave. Maybe we'll come back 1000% braver next year, who knows. But I think the key point of our presentation, as well as talking about our own journeys, was to hopefully try and encourage people to reflect on their journeys. Like, we've all came so far and we're all doing such a good job and we all have so much to offer, which leads us to our conclusion. Is there anything else we want to say?
Just these.
Which is, we don't know where we're going from here, but we promise it won't be boring. And also another honour to Rachel Campbell, our fabulous co-head. Did you die though? Constantly encouraging us to be braver by asking, did you die, after we do anything remotely terrifying.
Scary. We can't do that. But will you die though?
Will you die? Did you die? No.
We won't die. Give it a shot.
So I think that's us.
So that's us. Thank you.
Oh, that was super, absolutely super, Laura and Rachel. And it is just so absolutely wonderful that so much has happened, not just for both of you, but also for across the whole school. I just think that's absolutely amazing.
It's definitely had a knock-on effect across our whole staff.
I think it sparked some conversations, even with our male members of staff, asking how they could get more involved in Women Ed as well.
Oh, that's fabulous. That's
Not
over to you.
not just our teachers as well. Our school business manager is keen to become involved, and I did a shout out to her on Twitter to try and get her some connections.
And as we teach a mostly male cohort, I'm constantly telling our teenage boys how we are all involved in Women Ed and really trying that.
Oh, that's just fabulous, isn't it? And we've got Victoria O'Farrell, who's a new head of a crew in Blackpool, saying she'd really like to hook up with you both. That would be super, absolutely
that would be
super.
brilliant.
Shall I put our Twitter handles and our contact back on for a moment?
Yeah, put that in the chat. That would be, oh, there you go. There you go. And what's also lovely, I put in the chat that Rachel Campbell is one of the authors in our Women Ed edition of Innovate Journal, which we're going to launch at the end of the Unconference on Sunday. So lots and lots of developments there. And Laura's article is, Rachel's article is absolutely fabulous. So look out for that on Sunday. It's Sunday lunch. Thank you so much to you very much. Thank you very much to you both.
Thank you.
Definitely 10% braver, if not 100. Thank you and congratulations. Bye-bye. Right, is Lisa coming back in now? Hello, Lisa.
Hello, Vivian. I was just trying to get my background jobs done, taking co-hosts off and putting co-hosts on.
I do have to say a big shout out here to Lisa, because we're all comfortable in our time in mid-afternoon. What time is it for you, Lisa?
Oh, it's late now. It's almost 8 in the morning, Vivian.
Lisa's been up for hours, absolutely hours. So thank you very much for introducing this, and then you can go back off for a sleep,
Right.
Lisa.
So everyone that's in the audience, you have already heard that many of us think of Vivian as the queen of Women Ed, and she should have her, yes, that's a new crown.
No, it's the one I had. Well, I've had it for ages. It's flopping now, but I grabbed it when Yamina kindly said that. I forgot to put it on.
So Vivian will be joined by a panel of empowered, brave, probably showing some vulnerability women, Rachel, Shahida, Jeanette, and Jules will be speaking to us about leadership development through the lens of a woman. So we look forward to this. Remember our Menti code. I will post it in the chat shortly. Also remember hashtags, Women Ed, hashtag disrupt, hashtag innovate, and hashtag change. Are you ready to take it away, Vivian?
Yes, thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing the rest of the panel. Thank you, Lisa. Hello, Jeanette, Shahida, Rachel, and Jules. Woo, Jules not in a car this time.
I'm now in my teenage daughter's bedroom at the top of the house because we're having our kitchen done. So it's like, wherever can I be in a quiet corner?
Well, it's super that you can all join us, and we've got 40 minutes, which I know will whiz past really quickly. So I'm just going to kick us off by a brief introduction. And hopefully people will ask questions in the chat that we can all be answering about this. We've all come together to discuss leadership development through the lens of a woman. because in one way or another, we're all part of the NCE, the National College of Education's Senior Leadership and Masters Programme, and in different ways. I'm there as a representative as Women Ed, and because we have a Women Ed cohort, so while there are 500 learners on the programme, regularly the Women Ed cohort come together, which I know colleagues are going to talk about and how that works. I think it's an absolutely brilliant opportunity for women to be supported in their leadership development and look at their own leadership as a woman. And it's also interesting, some of the reactions we get from some of the men. We've just started a new cohort, and there was a super tweet where a man was saying, can I not come over and join the Women Ed? You lot seem to be having more fun than we are. So we're learning and we're having fun all together. But why we think it's important is that we're going to have women coming into schools as senior leaders and as head teachers of the future, ladies, head teachers in the future, who are going to be leading as a woman. And we want to unpick that in this session. And our basic question is, should all leadership development look at leadership in schools through the lens of a woman, given we are 75% of the workforce? So that's my setting the scene. And Rachel, you're going to tell us a little bit more about the Women Ed cohort.
Thank you, Vivian. I really enjoyed Rachel and Laura's session and the phrase, did you die though? Which my phrase is usually, what's the worst that can happen? So thank you for allowing me to come on today. I've been really enjoying the variety of sessions that have been on, so much great stuff going on. I think it all started back in 2020 when Vivian met with NCE and we decided to do a Women Ed cohort. I came into NCE in the September specifically to run that group because I was really wanting to work with female leaders. And I think, you know, disrupt, innovate and change just aligns so well with what we're trying to do. I think NCE, we are very disruptive in the leadership space and take absolute joy and pride in that. We basically run one programme, which is made up of several different modules. And we have a Women Ed group where it's all females, where we look at and pull on the threads of the learning and design separate monthly engagements that Vivian and I meet and we discuss and we think about what it is that we feel women need. So we know what holds women back. We know it's imposter syndrome and the need to be perfect and the lack of confidence, the reluctance to speak out, wanting to be liked, all these things we know exist. What we wanted to do is say, yes, those things do exist, and what do we do to tackle them? I think it's really important for me as a woman to support other women and to help them realise that they are good enough. And I firmly believe that when you get in a position to help, you need to turn around and you need to pull that other woman up behind you. And we did a little bit of work looking at the Women in Workplace report from 2020 from McKinsey, which spoke about something called the broken ladder. And the broken ladder is where women are taking their first step potentially into management and leadership, but there isn't a woman there who's a role model for them to see. And in America, specifically over COVID, 1 in 4 women left the workplace. Lots of women chose not to take a promotion. And this is something I think is really important that we have those role models. So when I initially met the kind of 55 women on this cohort, I was really struck by the lack of confidence and the lack of belief in themselves and their abilities, despite amazing backgrounds and knowledge and effectiveness on their context. There still remains this kind of lack of confidence. So Vivian and I met and we wanted to address both of these issues via the content of the course, such as strategic leadership and people development, viewed through that lens of female leadership. So what does this mean to us as women? Because it is different. And the Masters and Apprenticeship programme allows Vivian and I the flexibility to respond to the needs of our cohort. So we've just written the programme for our monthly engagements for year 2 of the initial cohort, and for year 1, it looks different. So we've learned from last year what we did well, what we could do better. And I think what has happened in these monthly engagements is that we've given people an opportunity to have a voice. We contract around those groups, it's a safe space, and that's really important to us, that it's safe and that people can say what they think and feel and be vulnerable in that space and feel not judged but supported, to be able to tell their stories. And I created professional peer learning groups for everybody. So because it's national, we put everyone into kind of regional groups and then left them to it. And it is entirely down to the women in those groups, the kind of magic that happened within those groups. So learners have created networks and friendships. For me, this has been hugely impactful. We know that men have much better professional networks than women. So when they go for a job, they probably know somebody who knows them. They've got a link, a connection, which gets them through that first foot of the door that women don't often have. So I wanted those professional networks, but what they've grown into is something that will sustain them, I think, for the rest of their career. Friendships. They don't just talk about, oh my God, Rachel's making us do another task, another essay. It's also, they talk about parents and wives and husbands and children, and everything else in between. And those groups have been almost like an unintended consequence of what we did. We set out to kind of give some, share our expertise and our knowledge and pull on the threads of what we're learning. But the groups themselves have been the thing that I think has made the most difference, as well as the learning and the knowledge. And I think Vivian and I are made of similar stuff. We're quite stern and we can be quite exacting and challenging, and we push the cohort to be their best. I had someone the other day when I was doing a review with them, and she said, I can't start this essay. You know who you are if you're listening. And I was like, right, open a document then, let's start. Because I know she can. And there were lots of things holding her back, but I know she can do it. So we just started doing it together. Little heart from someone in the chat there, we'll leave it at that. But I absolutely believe in that person, and she's absolutely wonderful, and she could do it. She just needed me to give that push. But I would say that what that kind of challenge and that push comes from is a real sense of love and absolute belief in those women that they can reach their potential. And I think over the 12 months, the programme has given me so much joy and lots of laughs. It's been more successful than I ever thought it could be. And I don't mean success in terms of promotions, although there have been lots of support given by Vivian, lots of support, peer support given, a little bit of support given by me. But I think the success for me has come through seeing, after 12 months in kind of at the end of the year reviews, that renewed confidence in what women now feel they can do as a result of being part of this group. Their line managers talk about them having more reflection, of speaking with greater confidence in meetings, of being knowledgeable, of knowing that they have something to give and being confident in giving it. And to me, that is just the best thing that can have happened. Not the dancing in some terrible nightclub in Birmingham the other weekend.
I was shocked. I was utterly shocked that evening.
And I think going forward, what's next for us? We have a bigger women ed team now. So Alison Bellingham has joined us to take the next cohort through with Vivian and I. We have Nell Van Zanten, who is an apprenticeship ninja as far as I'm concerned. So we're bringing broader expertise to the group so we can support them in their studies in this year. We've now got middle leaders who are going to join some of our sessions, so we hopefully will hear their voices too and hear how they're struggling and what we can do to help them. We've also introduced something called Add and Amplify to NCE, so we're trying to get our language across my workplace as well. So Add and Amplify was something I blatantly stole from Barack Obama's cabinet, which is all about ensuring women have a voice when they're at a meeting. So if Jules was to say something, I would say, I'd like to amplify what Jules has said so that idea is owned by her and someone can't swoop in from the left and take it, or say the same thing 10 minutes later and go, oh, that's a terribly good suggestion, Charles. The add bit is to say, I'd really like to amplify what Jules has said. That's a fantastic idea. I'm going to add this. Not, could I just, would it be all right? Is it okay if I say? It's I add and amplify, and we've introduced that language at NCE. I think I've probably learned just as much from doing this role as I have been able to give to other people. So learning from the Vivian's expertise and experience, learning from the learners and what they've done has been fantastic. And I really think that we should live the Women Ed approach of disrupting and being 10% brave. I've got my 10% braver badge on, Vivian. I was very proud to get last week. I think I could auction on eBay for an absolute fortune. I work with a brilliant male boss who is an absolute ally of Women Ed and Women in particular. And he had a board meeting last week, and he said, is there anything you want me to bring up? And I said, yeah, don't forget to tell them that I'm great. And he did. We're having that impact. So I think for Women Ed and NCE, this is just such an aligned relationship that is so mutually beneficial and has had such an impact, and I hope will continue to have a massive impact in giving women the opportunity to learn and develop and have confidence to have their voice heard. Because it's not enough for me to have a seat at the table. We want to hear people have their voice, and also to encourage other women in teaching or whatever educational context they work in. If they're a teacher, a middle leader, that there is a role model there, maybe as a flexible head, as a deputy head, whatever that role may be, so they can see themselves in their envisaged future, which is really important to us.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you so much. And I think it's important for us to say the programme is open, as you said, to all women in education, and it's super that we've got a cohort of school business leaders working with us as well. So it's important to think it's not just for teaching leaders in education, but for all women who are working in education as a senior leader. Absolutely wonderful. And I would just like to add, Rachel, to what you were saying about the disruptive nature of what we've done with this programme, is because we really shifted a lot of the curriculum around.
Right.
There were times at the beginning when we were looking at that I was valiantly trying to find a recommended piece of reading by a woman anywhere in the list for a module. And it takes us looking through leadership through the lens of a woman to notice those things. That needed an increase in diversity, both in terms of the readings, but also the topics, the curriculum aspects. And it was also really, really important that it was all those curriculum changes, which were made because of the lens of a woman, were then understood and undertaken and learned by the entire cohort of 500 women and men, not just the 54 of us, 55 of us in the Women Ed cohort.
And I meant to say as well that not only did we do that, equally in terms of the NCE podcast that we do, we were able to open up some broader subjects. I know that you've talked about menopause as part of this global Unconference, but the things that affect women to a greater extent, and we've been able to bring that to an audience of all our learners. And we have got some really good Heath allies, I think, in NCE who have taken that on. So we hear from lots of female voices, like our friend Dr. Emma Kell when we talk about well-being, and Adienka when we talk about emotional intelligence and the language of that. So we've been able to have influence in other parts of the curriculum, so not just the kind of stated curriculum, but things like the podcasts and the workshops.
Brilliant, brilliant. And so we do have representatives from the first Women Ed cohort of learners here. I loved Jules' face, Rachel, when you said everybody had become much more confident, because Jules' face wasn't confident at that point. So we're going to start with Jules, very definitely. And Shahida and Jeanette, just chip in now from now on, whatever you want to say. So you're on this programme, you're flogged to death by Rachel on a regular basis, whereas I don't think I'm challenging. I think I'm personally charming in our engagement sessions. So it's over to you to confirm all of that. Jules, have you become more confident as a result of this programme?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because we talk about the lens, and also I talk about vision a lot with regards to leadership. And what Women Ed did from a very early time was to open my eyes to patriarchy and sexism and the stats in education. And so it's quite fitting that we're doing this leadership through the lens of a woman. And I think what's lovely about the NCN, the NCE idea, is that a women cohort has allowed us to really focus in on that, and hopefully change things. And I was very mindful. I was doing an H.G. Wells story the other day as an English teacher on Valley of the Blind. Some of you may know it, but it talks about how somebody with sight goes to this valley where everybody is blind and imagines he's going to be king of that valley, and actually it turns out he's very clumsy and very uncomfortable, and they're much more graceful because they know their ways. It reminds me a little bit of disruption with regards to turning leadership on its head for women. Some of the things I noticed, I'll come to my confidence bit, so I'm not answering your question, I know, but some of the things I've noticed through Women Ed is things like leadership. So you walk in, I did a lot of advisory teaching, so I'd go into a primary school and it would be all women except for the head, or I'd go into, and it's still happening at some of the schools I am involved in at the moment, where the whole leadership team is male. And I've started to realise, not through any nastiness or meanness from those men, that it's actually the diversity of leadership that's missing. And so there's less challenge. And I think what this leadership course has allowed me to do is to really read the evidence and the research and the stats and become very aware of how we've been cultivated, if you like, to have immediate respect for a man in a suit. And that is part of the confidence, as well as to really disrupt that and to start seeing leadership in a lot of different ways. So what has made me more confident in this course, and Women Ed has done this too, because as Vivian knows, I lack confidence, huge amounts of confidence, and that's an intersection as well. You know, I'm a woman, but I'm a mother of 4, so my career was disrupted massively through that time. I also have ADHD and went to a secondary modern and failed on my exams and left school with no qualifications. So, you know, so for me, those things have always made me lack confidence. So the course has allowed me to really read up and see that leadership can be different, and it can actually be more successful when we challenge and we have diversity within our leadership teams. And that for me is something that has allowed me to lead how I want to lead, with compassion and tenderness, and to really work on that and to constantly challenge myself that, am I doing this because that's what I think leadership is, which is the old, if you like, testosterone view of leadership, or am I doing this because these are my values? And that is really starting to allow me to focus in on those things. So it's a fantastic course for that. It's been great. It's very evidence-based, because we all have to be evidence-based these days. And but you know, there's a lot of great research. But the fun bit of it, which I love, is the camaraderie within the group and this sort of disrupting networking. You know, you couldn't get more different to the networking of old, which I've loved. So I've loved the challenge. I've loved the compassion that we have for ourselves. And I just want to leave you with one more example before I move on to Shahida and Jeanette. I accidentally WhatsApped somebody in my NCE Women Ed WhatsApp group the other morning. I was supposed to be waking my daughter up, because I wake her up through WhatsApp, and I pressed the wrong button. And so anyway, I got this call back from 2 of them going, "Are you okay?" Because it was sort of 7 in the morning, you know, what's wrong? And I was like, "Oh, no, it's fine. I'm sorry. It's a real accident." But actually I ended up having this really lovely coaching conversation with one of my group about an interview. And we talked about her interview and it was really great. It was like this 5-minute coaching kind of conversation that we had from an accident from calling my daughter. And I think that kind of encompasses the whole of Women Ed and the whole of NCE, that it's all about, you know, fitting those times and being friends and supporting each other. So yeah, so I am, to answer your question, more confident, but I don't think I'm ever going to completely get rid of that.
Oh, that's super, Jules. Shahida, Jeanette, who wants to come in?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a lot of what Jules has said as well. But for me, it was more, yes, I was involved in a mainly female SLT, but I didn't fit the same box as everyone. And it was regardless of where I went for SLT within where I was working, everyone seemed to kind of fit into a certain box, and I was different. My personal circumstances were different, my expectations were different, and actually being on the course with so many other women made me feel that actually I'm not the only one, and being just as valid as a leader just because I don't feel into the same box. And it was a confidence thing, because I'd stand back and I'd think, well, am I able to give just as much? Am I just as valid and just as valuable as everyone else that fits into a box? And to actually see other women, other leaders doing what I want to do, going where I want to go, with the same circumstances, with the same understanding, was a big thing for me, because I hadn't seen it up to that point in my career. It was either all men or women that kind of had a certain background, personal life, you know, they'd gone up to leadership in a certain way, and I just didn't fit that. So for me, it was a massive thing to be able to see that actually diversity within a female leadership team as well is really important as well, because I had it.
So just to amplify what you were going to say, but don't you think that it's the thing you get when you're in the Women Ed cohort is a sense of authenticity? Nobody ever puts on a persona. And I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot of time both coming up through in my career being told that I have to have a professional mask. And I still get that. I still get people told that, you know, I'm either overly emotional or I get too involved. And we do get emotional on Women Ed, don't we? But we do, and it's a good thing. It's never seen as a sign of weakness. It's seen as as Rachel said, it's a safe space, but everyone just brings their real self to the table, and we learn from each other because there's no pretense, and we admit our vulnerabilities. But we also, I think we've all learned that we can challenge, and that conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. That was what that came up very, very early on in sort of cohort. Module 1, we talked about the fact that conflict can be a good thing, and in fact we should be this challenging each other, and we do. And then we go out and have lots and lots of fun when we see each other. And we've just had our first face-to-face. Just face-to-face and meeting people for the first time. There was a lot of hugging because we feel like we've been through so much together since the beginning of the course. Got finally to hug both Vivian and Rachel, which frankly, it was worth traveling to Birmingham just for that. Also discovering that there are some unusually short people on the course and some unusually tall people. And the reason I had not realised this was because I'd only ever seen them from the neck upwards. So yeah, it's been the most sea change for so many of us. Shahida, sorry, I did interrupt you. I do apologise, but I got very excited, which we all do.
Absolutely fine. But yeah, I totally agree. I think we've learned to embrace ourselves and embrace those around us as well. And that's been the most important thing for me, was embrace me, embrace others, and be accepting of it. So yeah, it's been amazing for me.
Oh,
In terms of
absolute, sorry, that's just wonderful, isn't it? We've learned to embrace ourselves. I just think that is, that's exactly what leadership should be like for everybody, shouldn't it? And if you can embrace yourself, you can embrace others then, and bring people together. That's just wonderful, Shahida. Sorry, Rachel.
I was just thinking about some of the content that we've done, and we did a module on innovation and change. And I started doing a seminar, we were talking about negotiation, and I was messaging Vivian going, we have to do something on negotiation, because what came across really strongly was how much the women in the room would go to the floor for any other woman, but when it came to them, yeah, not so much. And what has been great about the course is we've been able to react very quickly to things, and we go off and work with Vivian and pull some content and then come back and say, right, I think this is an issue for us, we need to look at it. And I think that's been, I don't know about how about you three on the panel, but that's for something
felt very
for me.
Flexible. It's felt very dynamic. And I've actually personally, I've loved the fact that I feel that the course has adapted to the needs of the learners, which is what we all try to do as teachers, isn't it? So, hey, it's absolutely right that that's what should be happening on a course that's there for our professional learning as well.
What do you think you have learned then as leaders? So we've talked about the importance of being yourself and authenticity. What kind of leaders will you be from now on that you weren't before? What's shifted and changed for you, Shahida, in terms of what kind of a leader you are?
I mean, for me, I have a personality. It's quite, I'm quite loud. I'm, kind but loud, but also I've got that little bit of authority as well when I need it. And I'd always had examples of people who are just really authoritative. And the one thing it's taught me is it's okay to be me, but also foresight. Hindsight is really easy, but all the little things that it actually plays into, and you kind of the curriculum delves into all the little bits that go into leadership and all the things that are important, whether it's, your governing body or, your stakeholders, or how you're going to manage your finances or whatever else it will be. It's actually made me more rounded as a leader to have that foresight and be able to come up with something, and instantly it doesn't take me months and months now to think what am I looking for as an outcome and what will be the outcome. And I think that's been the biggest and most important thing for me. I think it was, by module 2 or 3, and I put it in my review, I now feel like I have foresight, which I didn't have before. So that curriculum has been really important in kind of developing that part of me.
I feel like, I was just going to say, I feel like I can articulate what was always very nebulous before about what to use Adinka's words, I think it was Adinka, North Star, what is it that gets me out of bed in the morning? What's my why? And I could never articulate that before. And now if when it comes to making decisions as a leader, I run it past that little test. What the decision I'm about to make, does it fit with my why? And I think that's one of the key things it's taught me. Sorry,
Fabulous.
Jump in, Jules.
I think I think one thing that was really nice was I think this is something that the NCU do really well as well, is they ensure that they've got a diversity of voices coming through in the lectures, which is really important, male and female. But a lot of the research that they give us and articles that they've given us it's been really lovely, because it sort of fitted with how I believed that I could lead, but didn't think I could, if you see what I mean. So like psychological safety, for instance, as soon as I was starting to read about that, it was like, yeah, that's exactly, that, like a bit like Jeanette says, that articulated exactly how I felt. But often before that, I wasn't sure if I had the confidence to do that, because I was thinking, is that is that allowed in a leadership role? Or it's I'm so different to everybody else. That's the other thing. I felt very different as a leader to everybody else, and I still do in interviews, and that has allowed me, I think, that sort of diversity has allowed me to think, actually, no, there is an opening for me to be a leader, that there is space for me to be there as much as anybody else. And I'm hoping all people feel that, really, that the more you read about leadership, actually, it is far more around psychological safety of your team and long-term rather than short-term gains. And
And you know, that's great. You know, that's something that I've taken away from it, and I'm really
I think
pleased about
Jules, that's really reflected in some of the conversations I've been having in the last month about the kind of feeling from learners that it's okay to have that view of who they want to be as a leader. So the stuff we did on ethics and the stuff we did on values, that they are absolutely legitimate and correct things to want to guide your leadership by. And I certainly think psychological safety and the Fearless organisation that we read has had a huge impact on all of us, and has allowed us to go back into our context of workplace and have those conversations, and actually has made people leave their workplaces because they thought, this isn't a psychologically safe workplace, this isn't an ethical workplace, this is not the place for me. But now I feel justified in being able to say I want something better that is for me, and recognises that those things are important.
Absolutely.
I don't think we can underestimate that. I mean, we're talking a lot about the impact it's had on us as leaders, but ultimately, of course, we then go back into our workplaces. And I think we also need to consider that this course has allowed us to have an impact on, as we've heard, people that work with us, and also, of course, most importantly, the young people that we're in the job for. So it's made us more effective leaders. It's made us more like we feel engaged in our own careers. But at the end of the day, what it's actually done is meant that we are providing better outcomes for our pupils, which is what we're all in it for, I think.
Yeah, we certainly want all of this learning to go back into the organisations represented by you. That's essential, I think, isn't it? And we hope that it will affect all the 500 learners, given we've shifted the curriculum round, and they'll be having some similar conversations. And yes, there are and have been promotions during the course, which is brilliant. So that confidence and that knowledge that you want to lead, and you want to lead an organisation for your next leadership step, I think is phenomenal with it. And we're certainly going to track those promotions, aren't we, Rachel?
We are going to do impact
because we
did
want that
say
impact.
Yeah, as part of the apprenticeship, which is the thing that funds this programme, you know, we draw down upon the apprenticeship levy. So it's really important that what we do has an impact, because it's taxpayers' money. And the purpose of the apprenticeship alongside the masters is to put that knowledge into practice within context, and to have an impact within the 2 years. It shouldn't be you've done a master's and then at the end you've read some nice books and know some stuff. It's you've done an apprenticeship, which is all about practical, testing out those things in that safe space. And you know, the apprenticeship does come with some, you know, tasks and things that you have to do, but for me it's actually the part that has the most impact, because you're putting that knowledge into practice on a regular basis, and I'm asking you about it. You know, tell me how you've used this knowledge, what has been the result of it. And it's, to me, it's really purposeful learning, and that sense of purpose comes back and then gives us a lot of satisfaction, I think, that we are having an impact on the communities that we serve, and the other women that we work with, and the other men that we work with. So that has been really important to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've got 2 questions for us to just ponder as we start to think about wrapping up. Number 1, who's going to join us in the January Women Ed cohort? That's a really important question. For example, Laura and Rachel earlier were talking about the qualifications they hope to get, or that they are getting. And I really do hope people will consider the Senior Leaders Masters Apprenticeship Programme and the Women Ed cohort in that programme as a really viable alternative. The apprenticeship levy, of course, if your school pays in, means your school isn't paying anything else out more for this programme, and that's really important. So maybe Rachel earlier would like to think about that. If you're thinking about doing some of the MPQs or a master's, then do have a look at what this programme offers. We think that's important. And my final question for us all in the last few minutes is, what are the implications for other leadership development programs then, from what we've all been learning? Thinking of the MPQs, thinking of other masters, thinking of international leadership development, which I know Liz Free, who's there listening, has a few words to say about the matter on that. What are the implications for leadership development from what we've all learned? So it's going to be a quick, rapid round table of answering what are the implications for other leadership development programs.
Certainly for me, it has to be diversity. So, you know, a bit like NCE doing, make sure you have a diverse range of voices that don't abide to stereotypes, that really disrupt the stereotypical molds that we see in leadership. And that comes down to auditing all your presentations, even mine. I audit mine now, make sure, you know, it's not just men in suits, so, you know, not just white women. You know, we've got to have a diverse group of voices, but that has to be not just ticking a box. We have to mean that as well. It's not just your PowerPoint, it has to be what you're saying and actually what you're doing as well, you know. So for me, that's really important.
And that does fit with the curriculum, because I was playing with that in the strategic leadership points and did have images of lots of men and then started disrupting it by adding the women in and showing the difference. So thanks for that, Jules.
I would say that we could other courses could learn from the flexibility of our curriculum, the fact that when something isn't working, being brave enough to say, okay, as the NCE has, let's put something else in its place that's going to be more appropriate. And so that sort of showing that corporate vulnerability, I suppose.
I mean, for me, I'd say personalised learning, because that's the one thing that I've got from this course is that you said it's adaptable, it's personalised, whereas every other leadership course I've done it's very rigid, it doesn't work around the learners. And I think that it's been really important to have it so personalised and so individualised for the actual cohort at hand.
It's so brilliant to hear that, because that's been our intention. So to hear that kind of echoed back, and you know, I completely believe in feedback is a gift, and I think we listen to learners and we do our best to respond. We don't always get it right, obviously, but the program's iterative. What Jules was just saying then about auditing, I meet with the lecturers before we start to think about the lecture with the academic team, so we can have more than one voice inputting into the content. So my voice is, my learners are coming out of school, so what we deliver has to be excellent and relevant, and if it's not, then take it out, because it has to be, you know, it's so important, that time that we take, that it must be right. So I think having that input in the design and hearing different voices when you're doing that piece of design around content is also really important. And it is very important to me that we get different voices and different ethnicity and diversity in. So, and also you ladies, I will be inviting you into the new cohort as well to let them know what you've learnt, because you are the role models now for them.
That's super. What do we want to say, Rachel, then, to people who are interested in this programme?
So we've put the link in, so please click on the link. Make sure that when you do click on the link, you look for the Women Ed, but we've moved it up, I think, so you can click on Women Ed, and you will come through and have a conversation with my colleague Sharon, and make sure that you say, I'm interested in the Women Ed group, please. That's the thing that's driving me, and then go through the process. It is a little bit arduous, I'm not going to lie, but we are using taxpayers' money, so it's important that we make sure that we do everything correctly. So please bear with us through that process. It's a little bit dull, but when you get here, it's absolutely brilliant. So click on the link, make sure you click Women Ed, have a chat with Sharon, and then come and join us.
And if any of you want to just to chat with me on via Twitter or whatever about joining in and any other questions, then just get in touch at Vivian Porritt, who seems to be at Women Ed. Haven't changed that, at Vivian Porritt, as it says. And bear in mind that question for other leadership development programs. So those of you who are on other programs, start raising some of these issues with them. If, as Shahida said, you think it's not personalised or it is too one size fits all, then have the confidence to raise our voices and say, there is another way of doing this, we'd like to. And I think that's important as well, because I know I certainly sat in lots of leadership development programs where I just couldn't see me in the program anywhere. And I think we've definitely changed that with the NCE Masters Apprenticeship. And if you want to join us in January, we would absolutely love to work with you. And we'd be charming, Rachel, wouldn't we? Absolutely charming.
Extremely, in our lovely northern way, where we're so charming. Didn't work. So charming.
Thank you very much.
There's one thing
Jules?
to say. I'll just say there's one thing to say, because I think people often, there's this sort of sense of soft and hard around leadership, you know, and I'd like to think of Women Ed, the Women Ed cohort, that we're soft around the edges, unapologetically so, because that's compassion. But my goodness, there's a strength in them in the centre.
Oh, what a fabulous way to finish. Thank you very much, Jeanette, Shahida, Jules and Rachel.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Vivian.
Join, sign up, everybody. It's fantastic.
Best thing you'll ever do.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Lots and lots there. How did that feel, right? How did that feel, Lisa?
You know, lots of those acronyms are a bit of a mystery to me, but you know what I was thinking throughout is all of the sessions, I know that women feel empowered and inspired, and they'll tweet and they'll put stuff in the chat. What I want to say now are to the folks who are watching us, who are still believing that they can't. You can. These cohorts are developed and designed exactly for you, for you to change your mindset around, I can't pursue a master's because of this, this, and this. You can. I, of course, am speaking from a place of privilege, I guess. I'm single, hey there, and I have no children. So when I did my master's, all I was doing was working full-time and going to school. I don't know how women with families, partners, children manage, maybe elderly parents, I don't know, but you can. So I'm not speaking right now to those of you who've already signed up and written the papers, and I'm speaking to those of you who are watching and listening and are trying to summon up that little bit of courage that you need just to take that next step. You can do it.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much. We're going to just have a few minutes comfort break if anybody needs to dash off, and we'll be back very shortly with Efwa. Looking forward to the next presentation.
Hello.
Hello, Efua. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Fantastic, you are. It's absolutely great. Thank you so much for asking.
Oh, that's a pleasure. Right then. We'll just, yeah, people are coming back in. That's super. Would you like to make that a big?
Let me make it bigger.
That's it then. Thank you very much, Efwa. And you are going to help us with all the difficult people that we deal with and we meet daily in our work. You're going to sort it all out for us, aren't you?
I can't say that I'll sort it out, but I'll try my best to talk about a bit about my experiences and some of the ones that I've met, and hopefully give you some tips and on like basically using emotional intelligence to overcome some of those difficult people that we meet.
Oh, I can't wait. Really looking forward to it then. Over to you.
So I'm going to start by apologising. I came out of hospital a couple of months ago with a very awful thing, and then I've had this horrible cough part of my recovery. So I have a massive lemon and ginger tea. So if I pause and cough, many apologies in advance as well. So
there is never, in a women-led event, there is never a need to apologise. Not at all.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So yes, I'm here to talk about difficult people, and I've only got 20 minutes. So it is going to be literally a very whistle-stop tour. And what I've done is that I've just titled my presentation of "If I Had a Choice, I Would Not Work With You, but alas, we have no choice of who we work with as well, or so they say." So my name's Efwa Hagan, and I'll tell you a tiny bit about me. If this will start working. So I'm actually an operating department practitioner, so I work in healthcare. It's probably a job that a lot of people have not heard of, even in the UK. But so we train predominantly in theatres. And now I'm now working as a workforce lead in my respective trust, which is Croydon, and I'm the first non-nurse in that role. So it's about, for me, it's about trailblazing and breaking barriers as well. I'm also a guest lecturer, and I lecture at various universities on lots of different topics, including this one. And a lot of my interests are background is communication. I've got a passion for education. I was an educator up until 6 weeks ago, where I kind of left the formal education role in theatres and now working in a different role. But my passion for education is still and always will be there. And I'm also passionate not only about patient care, but also about looking after staff. And that's my Twitter handle, that's on there as well. Oops, sorry. Go back to this. Okay, so next one. So what I'll go through very quickly, and I'm just aware of time, I do like to talk a lot, so you see me crossing my eyes over here to make sure I don't go over. So we're going to talk a little bit about, maybe to understand why somebody might be difficult. I'm going to go through some types of difficult people, and also some strategies that we can use to understand why a person may be difficult. And it's really important that we have these strategies as well. So I've got some questions to the audience. So first things first, would you say that you are a difficult person to potentially work with, maybe to talk to, or potentially to live with? And maybe are you difficult to manage? Because sometimes we don't realise that we may be the individuals with the issue and it's not the other person, but it's very difficult sometimes to admit that you might have an issue to everyone as well. So first things first, why are people, oops, there's my screen. So why do you feel that people may be difficult? And some of the things that I've come up with are some of the things that, so going through my career, not just in healthcare, I also used to work in media before for a long time, and then transitioned into healthcare. So I've met a variety of different individuals in my time. So maybe the individual doesn't understand what they're doing, or maybe we don't understand them. There's a lot of barriers, cultural barriers, language, time, effort. Maybe they're tired. We all know what it's like to be angry, not toileted, frustrated as well. So that can also have an impact on why you or other people may be difficult as well. Maybe they've got some personal issues, and sometimes people bring those personal issues. We always would like to not bring those personal issues into our workplace, but sometimes some people do. And, you know, on occasion I've done that because things can have a huge impact on you personally, and that could be difficult to kind of separate those two kind of sides of the brain as well. potentially you might be ignoring them. Not we all don't get on. Not all, I mean, I try and get on with everybody, but sometimes there's people that you try your best, but it doesn't quite work. And maybe they're offended that you're ignoring them in certain, and you may not be aware of it, because that self-awareness maybe sometimes it's lacking in all of us as well. Do they have all the options? So some of us, we may have to give alternatives, and I'll hopefully break that down in some of the types that I'll go through. And potentially you may not have given them feedback, because sometimes we've all worked with those people that you may have said something to a manager to say, well, actually, I want to challenge this behaviour. And you may get feedback. And I had that recently when somebody came to me about someone, and then someone else in the room said, oh, but they've always been like that. And I said, that's not really an excuse. But sometimes we allow behaviours to just continue, and then it becomes, we then end up with this toxic sort of environments that we want to avoid as well. Are they bullies? And there's different types of bullying. I won't delve too much into that, because I've only got 20 minutes to talk about this subject, so I don't want to digress. But bullying also has a big impact on our workplace, on our personal life, on everything. And that's something that we really need to sort of stamp out, but it is very difficult because there are so many different types as well. And also it may be to do with our own perceptions. So you may perceive, so you may be your perception of the person is difficult, but actually somebody else hasn't broken down their behaviour. So there are many different types of difficult people, but as I've got a very limited time, I'm only going to take 7 of those types. So I'll go very quickly through the exploder and explorer. Gossip, people pleasers, snipers, the indecisives, the know-it-alls, and people that are the enviers as well. So the first one is the shouter or the exploder. Apologies. And they've got certain traits, so you may sort of come across as well. So, you know, they may act like a child. Certainly, I think all of us, I mean, I don't personally have children, but all of us have been, say, in the supermarket setting, and we've seen the toddler on the floor, and we've seen the frustration with the parent or carer that is looking after them. And sometimes what will happen is that if that behaviour isn't challenged at that young age, it then continues. So as adults, they've not had that behaviour challenged throughout maybe their childhood or at the workplace, and they just think, you know what, if I act like a child, I'm going to get where I want to be. And then they just think, actually, instead of just calming down and dealing with what's going on, I'm just going to explode and act like a kid and throw my toys out of the pram and get what I want and stamp my feet as well. So how do we deal with these type of people? There's many different mechanisms as well. Sometimes you've got to give them time just to have a rant. I know that time is limited, but sometimes you just have to listen to them, which can be very difficult when you're very frustrated with them as well. You have to definitely, it becomes not adult to adult. You may end up being this adult to child relationship. So you have to then state your intentions and treat them like an adult, and having that, you know, that 3-step process of, I'm giving you a warning, that's the second warning, and then finally this is your final warning. And you have to be very clear in what your intentions are in terms of the workplace and what you want to achieve in potentially as an individual or within that team as well. You need to protect yourself, so it's important that you kind of give them their space, and sometimes you may need to walk away. Again, as I said, it's like a parent, it's like you being the parent and they are the child. So you may just need to walk away and then come and revisit conversations later on as well. And that's really important, because a lot of the time we don't protect ourselves. We then have this rolling thing, and then we are the ones that then feel guilty, but you shouldn't feel guilty at all. Let's check in time. So we also have the gossip, and that's one of my favourite bands, ironically. So, but they're very different from the traits. These are the ones that you meet them and they try and put people down. You talk about individuals and they've always got something negative to say about them. And they start like harmful rumours. And those of us that have been on the receiving end of these individuals, it's very, very difficult. I've had that recently, and it's just really hard, because you know how hard you work, you know the talent that you've got, and then you've got to deal with horrible rumours. It doesn't bode well for teamwork. It doesn't make it work effectively as well. But unfortunately, these people do exist. So the first thing that I always do, if I meet someone that likes to put people down, is just change the subject. I just say, you know what, let's just talk about something else, because I'm not going to engage in that person, and it's really important not to engage with them as well. And that's something, again, with privacy, it's about respect. It's about respecting yourself, because once you start engaging, you're then kind of putting yourself into that circle as well, of being in that gossipy circle. don't share too much information of yourself if you're dealing with somebody who gossips in that malicious way, because you don't know if they're going to talk about other people in that way. How do they talk about you behind your back? So it's really important that you don't overshare as well. And actually, these people, they're actually not happy. And this is what I realised about the individual that used to talk about myself and another colleague in a very horrible way. When we kind of delved into their life, they weren't actually happy, and this was a mechanism of defensive mechanism as well. So instead of dealing with what they're dealing with, it's just easier to kind of be bitch about other people as well. So we've got the people pleaser. And those traits, oh my God, these are the ones that always just sit in the meeting and they constantly just nod their heads, constantly agreeing all the time. And you just sit there and you're curious to think, do they actually understand what's going on? Or is it just they're just completely nodding as well? They don't actually follow through, so they'll just nod. And if you want them to do something, they'll say, yeah, I'll do it. And you're waiting and waiting for the follow through, and they don't actually follow through with what they're doing, because in the wider circle, they want to be seen as they're inclusive, but actually don't want to challenge any of those behaviours. So how do we deal with them? Ask them for an honest opinion. Say, do you know what? I just want to sound you out on this. And it kind of gets them, and it kind of gets you to understand where their thinking is as well. It's important that you set your boundaries and priorities. That's very important. And actually, you know, that whole thing that we talk about, those that have done coaching or mentoring or counselling, it's that thing of you get them to you paraphrase. So we will paraphrase someone's conversation if we're doing feedback, but you then also get them to paraphrase, because you want to make sure they understand where you're coming from. You want them to also understand that you've caught them out in that sense, but you have to be very subtle, because sometimes they don't want to hurt anyone as well, and that's really difficult when you're working with managers that are like that, and they contact you. So sometimes I might be contacted to make a decision, but actually it's a managerial decision, so you have to then work with them to get to a solution to help it work for them as well. So next one is the sniper. Oh, these ones. So their kind of traits. So these are the ones that I call them a bit of a grudge holder, and they hide in plain sight as such. So they all come across as very nice, but they're actually holding a grudge potentially against you. They may be a bit jealous, and I'll come to that in one of the types, the enviers as well. And they will just kind of snipe and say horrible things about you behind your back, but to your face they are just so lovely and will make you a cup of tea. I remember working with somebody a long time ago, and I still remember they were like, this person, they're always a bit, I don't quite know where they're coming from, but they always will make me some food, and I'm afraid of eating their food because I'm afraid they might have done something to the food. And I remember being so curious, but listening to how this person talks, it was very, very bitchy, and it was very snipey, and they just weren't happy that the person was getting on as well. Sometimes they can be a bit sarcastic, and I'm now working in healthcare, and we get a lot of sarcasm from certain, that whole surgeon and anaesthetist. Those are my main cohort of individuals that I work with, and there's a lot of sometimes sarcasm within the theatre complex, and you have to then kind of break that sarcasm as well, because it doesn't bode well for teamwork. It doesn't bode well for us to get to where we need to be as well. So how do we deal with them? Don't overreact. I remember meeting somebody like this and just kind of literally going into a conversation. It made the situation so much more worse. And with these things, you learn to evolve in time. So don't overreact. It's easy to say don't overreact, but it's important to step back and not overreact to them, because that's what they also wanting, is for you to react to what they're saying. It's important that you don't take it personal. As I said, it's so much easier for me to be on a presentation and say, don't take it personally, but we all take it personal, because we all know how hard you work. We know the personalities that we hold here, and all the individuals that are on this program, like for today, which is a great program. We all know where we are and where we stand. So it's so hard to say, don't take it personally, because we can take it personally, and then we can also take that home, and that can also affect so many issues in your work, in your home life as well. But it's not your problem, it's theirs. So the indecisive. So I'm working with individuals like this at the moment, because it's very difficult to be in roles where you may have to implement some change, and people may not be used to change as well. So I'm just aware of the time. So they will hide. And as I said previously, and some of the other difficult people I've described, they hide from making a decision, because they don't want to be seen as the bad person. They want to be seen as a good person. But as we all know, sometimes in certain roles, you may have to make a decision that you may like on the personal side, you may not agree with it, but as part of your work, you have to make those decisions and you have to kind of go out there into the wide world as well. So we can't always be seen as good. Sometimes we have to be seen as the bad person as such. But I always say to people, it's not personal, it's my job, because I have to put certain things in place as well. But it's again, it's a challenge to work with individuals that always want to have that halo on, and you're then seen as the one with the horns, the devil horns as well. So how to deal with them? Make it okay for them to be a bit indecisive as well. So you've got to give them a bit of space to also, again, like, you know, space is it's important, and it's not about time, it's about giving them a bit of headspace to think about what they're doing as well. It might actually be you, because all of us have been in the sit, and one of the previous speakers talked about writing an essay and procrastinating about an essay, and that is me at the moment as well. So it's that thing of, I know that I can do it, but actually I'm going to put it off because I just want to hide from it, and then I'll just get on with it maybe tomorrow, or take a break, or do something else as well. Limit the alternatives. If you're talking to somebody who doesn't know how to make a decision, usually I always give them 2 or 3 options as well, and kind of give them a time, so I need feedback by this time, and that helps to sort of frame and move the conversation along as well. If you don't give time frames, and that's the same with if you're emailing out in terms of getting information from a group, and you need that information back, and you don't give a time frame, you're going to find that you're going to wait forever for that as well. So it's important to set deadlines as well. And I've just put that at the bottom. So it's going to take a sip. So we've got the know-it-all. So we've got that and another one to come. They appear very confident, but actually when you delve into how they're speaking, they're actually speaking a lot of hot air in a really nice, polite way. So you can always spot somebody who thinks they know it all, but actually they don't know it all. And when you start talking, they will then say, they will be very condescending and very putting you down as well. I say a lot of the time when they're speaking, in my head I'm thinking you're just talking fake news as well. So it's not a nice thing to say in your head, but a lot of the time it's like you don't actually know what you're talking about, but you're coming across that you think you know what you're talking about as well. So it's always important when you're going into these conversations or meetings to say that actually you have to be prepared, you have to have that knowledge, and you are knowledgeable as well. State your position. It's really important to stand your ground as well. Easy, again, as I said, on a presentation. It's important that we work together, because we are working to the same common goal, whether it's patient care, student care, leadership, projects, we're all working towards the end of that goal as well. So we've got the enviers. These are the ones that are, I'm going to go very quickly because I can realize I've only got a few minutes left. The ones that hold a grudge, and I call them mood hoovers, because as soon as they walk into the room, it's like the whole energy is like sapped out, and you're just like, oh. And I don't know where everyone works, but sometimes if I'm working, say, in the clinical environment, you can see people looking at the rota and saying, oh, on that day I'm not going to be happy because I'm going to be working with a mood hoover. So it's really important that we kind of step up and we break this actual behaviour as well. They're a bit bitter. Sometimes they've been doing the job for a bit too long and they've not taken the opportunities. They're expecting to get opportunities, but we all know that you have to go out and grab these opportunities as well. And at the end of the day, it damages the organisation, damages reputation, damages departments, and that's the main thing to remember. So these are very difficult people to deal with, because sometimes they do not admit that they envy people. They just say, everything's all right, I'm okay. Again, really important to protect yourself. And the most important thing is to be professional at all times and not to worry about what they think or what they say. And keep your distance. Kind of say hello, good morning, goodbye, but nothing all about the nitty-gritty chat about what did you get up to as well. Just trying to keep them at a distance. So how do they make us feel? I'm just going to put this on quickly. As you can see, a bit uncomfortable. Are you allowing the behaviour to continue? Because they will just continue it if you don't actually speak up and speak to them as well. So using some emotional intelligence, and I'll put all these on here so you can see them all. So it's important, as we say, breathing is really important. So in simulation, we will say take 10 seconds to then make, if you take 10 seconds, that will then help you to make a decision clearer than just immediately making a decision as well. Form a solution, speak softly. Do you actually need to speak to them? Not all the time. So I'll just put that on the screen. And remember, it's, you know, to change someone's difficult behaviour, you've got to change your own. And I've just put one of my favourite quotes about life. And that's the end of that for me today. Thank you so much, because I'm aware of time as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Efua. You brought back so many situations and I thought, oh, I wish I'd known that then. So much advice and knowledge being shared there. And lots of comments about people going, oh, I needed that screenshot. So,
oh, okay, what I'll do, I don't know
we'll be putting the whole session up on YouTube.
Lovely.
So people can pause and take a screenshot of every single piece of fabulous advice. For all those situations where we feel completely dumbfounded or people just seem to wipe the floor with us, that would be just brilliant. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of the Unconference then. Bye-bye. Thank you. And our next speaker, Dr. Sharon Shembri. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sharon, did I pronounce that correctly?
You did, Vivian. Very, very well done, darling. Thank you.
Thank you. And where are you from, Sharon? Can you tell our audience?
My accent's from Australia, and I'm actually in the US. I've been in the US for 9 years, and I've been in academia for 25 years. So, yeah.
Great. I wanted you to be able to share that because we have a Women Ed Australia network and a Women Ed US. So you're very, very welcome to join us for both parts of your identity in that way. Sharon, would you like to tell everybody what you're going to be speaking about?
Lovely. Thank you, Vivian. And thank you very much for inviting me to participate in your Unconference. I love the concept.
How's it going for you so far?
Excellent, excellent. And interacting on Twitter as well. So brilliant. I'm going to present today a presentation titled Stories from the Edge. And I'm talking about the edge in terms of women in academia, women in higher ed. So I'll just, so you should be able to see my screen, yeah?
Can you make it larger?
Yes.
Present, yeah.
There we go.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Sharon.
Excellent. Okay, so you'll find me on Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. I'm kind of pretty easy to find and active on social media. I want to say that academia has been a very good place for me for my career. This place of learning is a place of intellectual leadership where we can experience respect and influence, but unfortunately that's not always the case, and especially so for women and people of colour. And we hear many organisations and institutions pitching a strategic intention related to diversity and inclusion in the current environment. The thing is that while organisations and institutions may well have very good intentions with regards to ensuring that their workforce is indeed diverse, there's a very big difference between having a diverse workforce and actually valuing their voices. So inclusion is a step beyond diversity that can be a very rough ride for minorities that are brought into particular organisations and institutions. And women in higher ed, this is one of the cases where we have to be aware. We have to have our antennas up. And what I'm presenting to you today with regards to stories from the edge is a strategic story, a story about how can we facilitate our own resilience and how can we strategically navigate this sometimes precarious landscape. Now, statistically, in higher ed, what we see is a higher number of women being enrolled in higher education, And in recent stats, in recent years, we've seen a higher number of degrees being achieved by women. And in the academic year of 2020 to 2021, so this past academic year in America, we've seen 59.5% of US college students as women. That's fabulous, and that's important to note, because now what we've got is a situation where the majority of students are women. The majority of graduates are women. Okay, now let's shift gears and talk about women in higher education leadership. So we've all heard about the glass ceiling, and some of us have actually experienced it. Some of us have broken through it. And there is an increasing number of women and minority populations in leadership in higher ed, working as administrators. But the big but is that they do still remain underrepresented at the top of the institutional chart. In fact, less than 40% of executive leadership roles are held by women in higher ed. And so what that means is that we are still, some of us, still breaking through that glass ceiling. You know, the challenges don't stop there. So look at the stats more specifically on this graph. What we see is that women of colour are underrepresented in faculty roles as well as administrator roles. Men of colour are similarly underrepresented, but not as much. White women, again, not as much, but overrepresented in staff and professional roles in higher ed. Of course, overrepresented in faculty and administrative roles, we've got the white men. And that's US stats. Okay, so look, we may well break through this glass ceiling, but like I said, the challenges don't stop there. And what research is now documenting is something known as the glass cliff. Women who break through the glass ceiling and obtain a leadership position are unfortunately often set up to fail, or at least set up for a role that entails greater risk. And so what, right? Like, what do we do about this? If we're going to recognize that the glass cliff is something beyond the glass ceiling, then what do we do? How do we handle it? Well, that's why I want to talk strategy, because the institutions that fail women fail. If we've got a majority of student population and graduates that are women, then we need women in higher education leadership roles. And management research has shown for many years, actually multiple decades, that a feminine style of leadership is actually a superior style of leadership. And that was shown to be particularly the case in the Nordic cultures. And why is that? Well, because a feminine style of leadership is indeed more compassionate, more nurturing, more humanistic. What we seek to do is lead, inspire, and transform. And you can see that in every presentation here today at this conference. The problem with that is that not everybody recognizes the value of this feminine approach to leadership, this humanistic approach. It's time consuming and it takes a lot of energy. And so this is why some who are currently in leadership roles in academia do not actually value this humanistic approach. So what do we do? Well, I'm pitching courage as a skill, and I'm drawing this note from the work of Kathleen Reardon. Some of you may well know her work. She's a UK lady that has worked in America in academia, in higher ed. And what she suggests is that in the business concept, because she works in business schools like me, in a business concept, courage seldom resembles heroic impulsiveness, but rather courage is more like a calculated risk-taking endeavor that is learned and refined over time. And the situation that we've got in academe is that risk is minimized and time is extended. So when we take on a leadership role, we want to understand that we are actually taking an intelligent gamble that requires courageous competency, at times at least. And Reardon talks about these various decision-making skills and processes that we can put into our basket of tools, our toolbox, in order to help us, in order to facilitate the way that we manage and the way that we prepare and manage for leadership roles and challenges and decisions along the way. So when these skills behind these bullet points that I've got on this slide here, when these skills, decision-making skills behind courageous competency align with our academic and our professional goals, then we are empowered to make bold moves and give us a higher likelihood of success. People who become good leaders have a greater willingness to make bold moves, but through careful deliberation and preparation. And this is a practice. This is something, this is a skill that we need to develop. So now let's talk about these 5 bullet points that I've got here. The first one is setting goals. I mean, how mundane is that, right? But what I'm talking about and what Reardon is talking about is setting attainable goals. I don't know if any of you guys can relate, but sometimes because I'm ambitious, sometimes the goals that I set are not necessarily realistic. So we have to set attainable goals. And let me give you an example of how we can actually go about this in a strategic manner. We have our goals right now. Some of them may well be lofty goals. I call them the 40-foot goals, but some of them may well be closer within reach, 4-foot goals, if you like. And so while we are working on our 40-foot goals, we definitely want to be striving towards our 40-foot goals. We want to have in process multiple 4-foot goals along the way. In academe, an example is striving for various accreditations that we can achieve. In the business world, AACSB or EQUIS accreditation, for example, these are lofty goals. And there's very few business schools around the world that have achieved AACSB, EQUIS, as well as AMBER accreditation. It's talked about as the Triple Crown. So in a leadership role in a business school, maybe the goal is to achieve one or more of these accreditations. However, the attainable goal before you get to that lofty goal of the accreditation is implementing, designing and implementing the quality processes that are necessary to achieve that lofty goal of accreditation in the longer term. So there's no need to announce this lofty goal until many, if not most, of the quality processes needed to achieve that lofty goal are indeed in place and in process. So that way, you're setting attainable goals as the 4-foot goals, as the quality processes on the way to achieving the lofty goal of accreditation. But when you're announcing the lofty goal of accreditation, it's well within reach. And so it's not viewed as too much of a stretch. It's not necessarily viewed as a lofty goal. So setting attainable goals is definitely about prioritizing goals, recognizing what's short-term, long-term goals, and then operationalizing those goals with your team in mind. Okay, let's go to the next one. Tipping the power of balance in your favor. And if you are reminded us in the previous presentation that people pleasers are not very good at the follow through. And tipping the power of balance in your favor is definitely about follow through. And that preparation for tipping the balance of power in your favor and following through, that preparation starts today. So power is something within our control, because we can develop relationships and develop our influence. And women in academia, women in education, women in higher ed, relationships, nurturing relationships, it's one of our superpowers. So let's put that to work. So what I'm talking about here is developing our supportive networks, where we can not only draw on those supportive networks when we need an extra help or an extra boost to our confidence, but also when we want to influence decisions. And the part of that, in terms of making those supportive networks work in our favor, is managing upwards. So rather than going directly to whoever it is that you want to influence, we can nurture our relationships in and around us and them. who are the informal influences on that decision maker that you are trying to negotiate with. So we want to tip the power of balance in our favor by leveraging our supportive relationships and networks, and leveraging the informal power structures that surround those who hold the formal power roles, the officials in our systems. Okay, next bullet point, we're talking about weighing the risks against the benefits. So here we're considering direct and or indirect action. We're weighing the risks against the benefits. We're considering direct and or indirect benefits. So who will win and who will lose with whatever action you want to take? What sort of effect is the potential action that you're considering going to have on your reputation and theirs? And to give you a low-level example of what I'm talking about here, let's talk about plagiarism. You know, many institutions have quite severe policies with regards to students that are caught out plagiarizing, but typically they're not often enforced. And so, you know, like it's a policy without teeth. And one of the ways that I've handled this over the years is that because I've been in academia so long, even before I load an assessment item into the software to see if it's plagiarized, I can smell it. And I tell the students, don't try to plagiarize because I can smell it. But anyway, some of them still give it a go. And so when I catch a student out, the first thing I'll do is find where they have plagiarized from. So, you know, I do some fact checking. And then the next thing that I'll do is I'll pull them into my office and have a face-to-face, or in the COVID context, a virtual conversation. And I will highlight to them that the institution has actually a very severe policy with regards to students who are caught out plagiarizing. And I haven't reported this instance at this point because I wanted to have this conversation first. And so basically I'm scaring the student very deliberately. I'm scaring them. And then after that meeting, I will send them an email and say, you know, here is your options to maybe resubmit or maybe opt for a 0 grade for this piece of assessment and then carry on. So basically I give them a second chance, whatever form that takes. So what I'm talking about here is a less glorified, a less formal but courageous and effective strategy. And what I'm talking about is replacing that conflict with more of a cooperative approach. And we can translate this suggestion, this strategic suggestion, with regards to dealing with the leadership above us. So if we see something going down that is not okay and maybe against institutional policy, then we can begin with some fact checking, and then we can go about having these private conversations to say, you know, this is what I see, this is the policy position, this is my position, and this is what we can do about it. And so effectively, rather than taking that confrontational approach that's probably going to get me and them in trouble, we go about it in a more indirect manner. And of course, the timing has to be right for this sort of thing to work. We have to build an army, again, reference to our supportive networks around us that we develop over time, that we develop throughout our careers. So, you know, it reminds me of Kenny Rogers' like Texas adage, you know, you've got to know when to fold them, and you got to know when to hold them, and got to know when to fold them. So we have to know when to make concessions. We have to know when to compromise, and we have to know when to lose the battle in order to win the war. So, you know, a spear in the sand situation might be considered bravado, but it's not necessarily always the best approach. We don't want to get ourselves into power struggles with the upper administration. We want to be smarter than that. We want to be more strategic than that. And so we have to ask ourselves, why now? Is this a hill that I'm prepared to die on? You know, am I prepared to take on this challenge? How long do I fear or feel that this challenge I might have to endure? So we have to ask the question, is it better to delay? You know, what difference is it going to make if I leave this a week or maybe 2 weeks or maybe longer? You know, time is extended in academia. And just like Ethua suggested that maybe sometimes silence is the best approach, I'm suggesting that sometimes we can delay and just ride it out before we get ourselves into trouble. So indeed, time may well be on our side. So be strategic with regards to timing. And then the last point relates to contingency. You know, never give up. That's how I am where I am, because I watched people fall to the wayside all along the way in my career. So yes, we have to be bold, and yes, we have to be versatile, and yes, we have to learn from other people's mistakes, but regardless, we have to have our own contingency plans in place. The strategic window may well be there for a short time. So if we miss the strategic window, then what? What do we do then? You know, how do we go about our everyday? And we can definitely learn from our mistakes and everybody else's. So have a backup plan. Understand that you may well have to go the long way around in order to get to the leadership position that you want, but that's okay. That's definitely okay. It's not a race and it's not a competition. If we are recognizing that collaboration is something that can be a very powerful tool in our toolbox alongside courage and courageous competency, then we are doing ourselves a favor. And I'll just add that in the COVID context, courage is sometimes a matter of life and death. So I mentioned the spear in the sand situations, the spear in the sand challenges earlier. I think that standing up for student safety, faculty safety, and having a clean and safe workplace is definitely something that we need to stand up for. While many challenges in academia are not necessarily matters of life and death, I think that COVID is one of those situations that it is.
Absolutely, Sharon. Thank you very, very much indeed. There are some questions in the chat you could have a look at and explore and answer if you would. And you've told us today for Women Ed that courage is a skill. And that means our mantra of 10% braver has been bang on the mark all the time. That's brilliant. I absolutely love that part of it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Sharon. And what have we got next? We've got the showcase from Women Ed Scotland, which I'm really, really looking forward to see. Can the team join us? Hello, Lena.
Hi, Vivian.
Hello, Christine.
Hi, Vivian.
Hello, and is that Audrey?
It is. Hi, Vivian.
Hello. Hello, lovely to see you all. We're so pleased you could join us. And thank you very much. And you're going to tell us how to grow a flourishing Women Ed network. We hope there's lots of people interested in joining or developing networks. So this will be a super, super session. Over to the three of you then. Yay, Ruth, it's Scotland, yay. Scotland, woo! Over to you.
Christine, are you there, Christine?
I don't know what's happened to Christine and Audrey.
Can you hear me, Vivian?
I can, yes.
Yeah, I don't know, Christine, Audrey, we can see the slides, but we can't hear you.
They're on mute. Christine's got, there we go. You're on mute. Do you want to take it off mute? Can I unmute you? Oh, there you are. We can't hear you, Christine. Are your speakers turned up?
Do you want me to make a start, Vivian, and then Christine can join back in?
Yeah, that would be good, yeah. I think.
Perfect. Okay, so we've rehearsed this seamlessly, so we could step in. Christine, when you're on, just interrupt me. So I'm Lena Carter, and I'm joined today by Christine and Audrey, who are on the other side of Scotland, and we'll maybe come back to why that is in a while. There we are.
Okay.
Yay! Perfect.
There we go. Technical hitches, and there we go. So 2 years ago, it was obviously the Sheffield Unconference. And you'll see by the slides there that there was Lena and there was Sarah Philp, but there was no Christine. And that was because I was recovering from radiotherapy following on from breast cancer and had hoped to be able to go to Sheffield, but was just too tired and had to accept that that wasn't going to work for me at the moment. So 2 years ago, if I look at my journey, that's where I was exhausted, tired after radiotherapy, and in a bit of a poor place in terms of professionally. But Lena went and told the story so far, and the story then did continue. And I suppose if we look at a year later, I probably wasn't in a very good place professionally following on from following on from the breast cancer treatment and not being in a positive place, positive workplace, had the impact. I could cope with one, but not both of them together. And I know I'd just like to shout out that Vivian was very gracious and helped and supported me through that time. And so did many, many people in the Women Ed network. So I could really feel the power of that. So there we were 2 years ago. A year ago, I wasn't in a particularly good place. And I think, to be fair, Lena and I had thought that our time had come and it was really, we were ready to pass the baton on to someone else that had a little bit more energy or a bit more drive. I think there was a bit of guilt that we hadn't really moved much on with Women Ed, although we had a few events. So we were at the point really this time last year, of thinking of giving up. And then obviously we're here. So why are we still here today? And I need to go on that tab. Sorry, we're just trying to move on our slides. And so we were inspired by Pam. So Pam is our wonderful, and I'm probably going to get her title incorrect, but the global leader. And she just inspired and encouraged us. She helped us with the technical things when we were saying, Pam, we don't know how to set up a Zoom meeting. We don't know how to manage breakout rooms. And she was just there for us. And we decided that we would hold an event, and that would be the launch pad, and we would hopefully get other people to come on board so that Lena and I could step away gracefully from Women Ed, having appreciated that we'd had quite a lot out of it already. So that's where we are, and we wouldn't be here today if it weren't without Pam. So we really wanted to mention her. Okay. So thanks to the kind of inspiration from Pam and supporting Christine and Lena, we did have a kind of reach out, and we now do have 3 leaders now, and I was lucky enough to join the Women Ed Scotland leadership team. And I actually should have been at the first event in Glasgow in 2017 when a lovely friend, Cara, had said, oh, you need to come along, you'd be great in this. And I just at that time thought, oh, I'm doing a master's, I had family bereavements, it didn't feel the right time. And I wish now I could go back to that 2017 person and just say, it's not about you doing things, it's about being part of a really lovely supportive network of like-minded people. So it was really great to then have that hand extended again and to be in a position to take it up. And Pam was great about devoting time to do the training and things so I could be part of that. And then we widened it up as part of a planning group as well. And we used that to really be able to plan how we're going to continue to grow the network of Women Ed Scotland. So we have a really popular podcast in Scotland that Sarah, who was at the event in Sheffield, she does a podcast with Billy Burke on changing conversations. And Christine and Lena were part of that for International Women's Day, and there was a whole podcast about Women Ed Scotland and the Women Ed movement and things. And that was really great. And then that led to an event the next day, which we already had planned, but it was a great way of promoting that. So we had the network event, and we had this kind of collaborate and connect, looking at 2 of our Women Ed values. And then from that, being able to use the feedback from the planning group, use the feedback from that network event to really help make sure we were meeting the needs of the community, the Women Ed Scotland network community. So we have a really big focus on well-being, because that was us responding to the needs of the members of our network. So we have coffee and cake. So we have that just now with this is my 10% braver Women Ed mug that I painted during the summer holidays. So we had, we have coffee and cake and really had that focus on well-being. So it's great input from Charlie about catching light, and we collaborated on and consulted on timings for these events. And so Saturday mornings for an hour were deemed the best time. People could devote an hour, and it allowed them to kind of free up the rest of their weekend for other commitments, and people were a bit too tired during the week. So that was the best time, and that was done in consultation with our network. And same with the kind of end of term celebration event. And we Lena done a blog about summer wellbeing sunshine, and how your well-being is not just for summer, it's, you know, it's to continue on, and what things could we do to help maintain that kind of well-being, because it's not enough to just top your battery back up again during the holidays. So we used that then as inspiration for our last event, which was on the 4th of September. And we have another coffee and cake planned for the 6th of November, which you're very welcome to come along to. So it was really just, yeah, thinking about what works for our members, you know, being able to maybe have a longer lie at the weekend. We had, how you turn up is how you turn up, and we've had little children in network meetings, and that's great, and that's what Women's Ed's all about. It's just, you know, this acceptance and being part of that community, and not having to make any excuses for things, which we heard on an earlier presentation. And now pass over to Lena.
So it was really important for us. We felt during the fact that we were still during a pandemic, the fact that Scotland has a remote diverse population, and we'll come back to that later on, the fact that we're so far flung, but we wanted people to be able to get together online because that was the only possibility. And something that I'd attended was an opportunity called Spaces for Listening, which had been organised by two amazing people. You can find them on Twitter. Bridget Russell is a leadership development specialist, and Charlie Russell is a clinical psychologist who works down in Bristol. And he and Bridget had created this platform, or this opportunity really, this space called Spaces for Listening, which was very much about how we connect and communicate when we're in this new world of being online, and, you know, the kind of limitations that come with that, and also in a pandemic. So having experienced this on a couple of occasions, I kind of said to the steering group for Women Ed, well, this is an opportunity that we could use this structure in our sessions as a way of really enabling our network to connect and communicate. And so, you know, the slide really is the themes and the drivers that had come and been given really by Bridget and Charlie, and huge credit to them because it's just such a phenomenal thing. But it really is about space, about being heard, about just turning up and bringing yourself wherever you are and being able to connect and then reflect with one another. And it's not about an answer, but it really is about spaces. And so the slide there is the kind of, you know, the basic premises that come from Charlie and Bridget. If you can move the slide, please, Christine. So it's very simple. It's 3 rounds. It's 3 prompts. Each round has a prompt. Timings are absolutely crucial. We all know that there's that terrible thing online where you interrupt, or you're not quite sure, and is it the network connection, or have you just, or, you know, and it's about having timing and giving people space. It's about equality and equity. So when you turn up, you say your name, but you don't necessarily say your title. And it's really, really about just meeting. Anyone can pass on any of the 3 rounds. You start where you are. There is a really important element about safety. So people bring whatever they want to bring. Sometimes the conversations are difficult. Sometimes they're upsetting. And you have to accept that when you leave the space, you need to take care of yourself after the space, because there is no follow-up, and it is a confidential space. So we then, next slide please, we did Spaces for Listening, the Women Ed Scotland mix, and so we had our first opportunity to explore this on the 13th of March. So in round 1 it was, what's your name and what are your thoughts about women progressing in leadership and education? In round 2 it was asking people to reflect and connect and feedback and say, oh my word, you said this, and I am so, you know, that's resonating with me. And then in round 3, it's very much just an appreciation of what's happened in the space. And it was all timed. I think we had about 1.5 minutes on each of those, but we'd given people the prompts beforehand, so they'd been able to think about them. And then we did then, after the 3rd round, go back into the whole group, which on that day, I can't remember, there were loads of us, And the one person from each group fed back the themes, just so we had some ideas then of what we might want to move forward with. And, you know, there was a lot about the male patriarchy. There was a lot about, you know, finding time to do things, about juggling, about imposter syndrome, about a need for coaching. So we took these themes and analysed them, and then that was the driver for kind of where we went next. Next slide, please, Christine. We did an evaluation, and in the evaluation we asked specifically about the spaces for listening, and the evaluation was really, really positive. Some of the glitches were that people didn't stick to timing, and so some people talk too much, whether that's because they're nervous or because they've got ADHD or because, you know, so it was about that. Well, I didn't really get my minute and a half, so we said next time we do it, we've got to be stricter with the timing. But people were so positive. Because it's just an amazing opportunity. So I would really recommend other people check it out, but it has really worked for us. And I think we've used it once or twice more, I can't remember. And I just want to add something here because I'm going to stop talking, but you know, I'm not with Christine and Audrey today. We've talked about tiredness a lot. I'm gutted. I wanted to be with them tonight and have the fears after doing this, but I'm absolutely exhausted. I've started a new job after a really, really difficult time professionally for 2 years. Not only was I going to give up Women Ed, I was going to give up a lot of things. And these ladies in the room have helped to bring me back to Women Ed, to my career, to everything. Women Ed wider has helped me. But I'm tired. So today I had to say, I'm going to have to stay here. I'm not going to drive across to Crieff today and then drive back tomorrow. But look, I can still be here. And that's testament to this connection, this network, and what we can do. So back to the other ladies.
Thank you. And just talking about our network, just having a look at our geographical spread, from Shetland Islands down to the borders, from the Western Isles over to the East Coast. And to give you a bit of an idea of scale, to go from Shetland in the north to the Isle of Arran on the west, it's 450 miles. It would take you 18 hours to be able to travel that. So I've been able to create a network, and it's not any surprise for those of you who know about the population in Scotland. Most of the population in Scotland is across the Central Belt, and you'll see between Glasgow and Edinburgh, right in the middle, we've got most of our kind of markers are there. But it's really important, and you can still feel isolated in that very populated part of Scotland, absolutely. But it's also really important that we have created this network which is reaching all parts of Scotland, and we're really proud of that, and that we're making connections and we're helping each other across what is really quite a wide geographical area. So and as I said, you know, we want people to come as they come and access this how they access it. So we have, for example, you might want to access it when you're at the play park, as Susie did, overlooking the sea. Or you might also be in the other side of the country and on the coast, and again, accessing it from the beach. And that's just the beauty of Women Ed Scotland, and being there and having that non-judgmental, safe space that you just turn up as you are, and you do it in a way that's going to fit in well with your life. So what are our Women Ed achievements, apart from the fact that the three of us are here today with our planning group behind us, and hopefully lots of others on our network listening in today. So for those of you that follow us, you'll have perhaps seen our Women Ed Wednesday hashtag that we've been tweeting since 2017. I think we've probably done most weeks, and we just try to send an uplifting message or something that's on our mind or something that resonates with us. So perhaps you can see that on Wednesday and maybe join in with us. So as I say, that's been going since 2017. We've even got our own logo, as you can see by our beautiful slides. And I'd like to thank Elaine Hayes for that, who very kindly, I don't even think we asked her, I think she just sent it to us, which was wonderful, again, through Parm. What else have we done? Informal support with applications and interviews. So we've put people in touch with people, we've coached people through things, we've read applications, and those are all things that we've done. And what we've done is we have created this network. You can hear the benefits that we three have had from this, but here are some of the comments about the benefits, about what Women Ed has done for them in the way that we're networking currently online. I'll just let you take a couple of minutes to look at that. So that's our section of our journey from Sheffield 2 years ago to where we are now. So what's coming next? So thinking about our themes for this Global Unconference and our disrupt and innovate and change, you can see hopefully that we have been innovative in how we've tried to kind of grow our network during really challenging times of COVID, geographical challenges. We've changed how we've done things, and we are kind of disrupting what the norms have been up till now. But taking kind of feedback, one of the things we're looking at is putting in support for women looking at the strategic leadership or promoted post interviews. Vivian did a great session on application forms, and we know that people have used that, and I've used that myself for putting in application forms and had really good feedback from it. But we would like to kind of support colleagues on that very Scottish context for those strategic interviews. And having been unsuccessful fairly recently myself, I got really great feedback, but I thought this shouldn't just impact on me. This, there's going to be other people. A number of us have been in this situation. So what can we do? How can we take this situation and make it beneficial for lots of other women in Scotland? So it's all about women supporting women. We are still in the middle of a pandemic, and I think we understand that, as Lena said before, people are tired. We will continue to have that ongoing focus on well-being because we know that's responding to the needs of our network. And we'll think about how are we going to continue to build our network in the future. We've created this virtual space, and the spaces for listening that Lena was talking about was really important in being able to have those kind of equity and the safe space, and all being able to feel heard in that space. And there's things we'll learn from that. We have done face-to-face events before, but when you again look at that geographical map that we shared, how do we do that moving forward? Do we have events around the country? Is it going to be a combination of online and face-to-face? And that's something that, as a network, will help shape moving forward. And we have actually, all three of us, been together once during the summer when we were planning and just kind of making that connection together. So, and we've been lucky enough that Chrissy and I are together, and we're missing Lena being here, but we're so glad that she's joining in with the presentation, because it would have been the same if it weren't all three of us being here. But like Christine and I, in the context we're in school, could not be sitting close together. We'd be 2 meters apart and we'd have a mask on. It's fine out of school, but not in school. And it's understanding that, but and we've really made a great connection, and it's really lovely that we've got each other to help drive, and the support of Pam, who has been amazing in helping us continue to build Women Ed Scotland. And we just want to say thank you. So I don't know if MD's got any questions for us, or having a quick look at the chat. Excuse me while I look a bit of scans.
Not so much questions, just lots of comments about how brilliantly you've really reinvigorated the network. And big shout out to Palm for supporting you in doing that as well.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think your community needs now, then? Given you're so far away and yet you've brought so many women together, what do you think is their need now?
I think because we're definitely not out the other end of the COVID pandemic, and I think it really impacted, and as I was saying, we couldn't be doing this at work, and every time we meet, I think what we've done is we've just kept each other going, and people have gone and they've managed to download a little bit in a safe space. So I think that's part of it. I think the well-being's been really important, but I do think that next step of, I think our context is really quite different. So lots that resonates with us in terms of the imposter syndrome and the language that we use. Gender gap a little bit, not quite as severe, I don't think, and I don't think the pay issues the same with us. So I think it is that bit about being 10% braver. And indeed at our last networking event at the end, we did say, right, come on, everybody shout out, what have you been 10% braver about? And lots of people said what they'd been brave about, and some people have been successful with that and not, although we all know that just being 10% braver is successful. So I do think it is that bit of somebody actually recently had said to them in their feedback about an interview about be more man. So we don't want to be more man. We don't want to be more man, but we want to maybe stop the apologising and stop that and start believing in ourselves.
Yeah, and I think part of that was also about making sure that we promote the things that we do already and not worry about, if you've not done that role before, you're never going to have been able to tick 100% of that box, and how perhaps other people can kind of project themselves into that role a wee bit more. And that's where we're recognising with the imposter syndrome and things that have come out in our feedback. That's why we're thinking the next stage would be about that kind of strategic, how do you sell that in an interview? Because we've taken your advice, Vivian, which was fantastic for application forms, and it genuinely has been really, it's changed how lots of people have done application forms. So real heartfelt thanks to you for that.
It's a pleasure.
Honestly, now it's about kind of how do we now take that into interviews, but maybe within that very specific Scottish context, because we know, you know, that's something that people are finding difficult. So we don't want to be more male, we want to be genuinely and, you know, value driven and be ourselves, but being able to maybe have the right approach or the right wording that helps us to be able to do that and show what we're capable of. So I think it will be that kind of balance moving forward.
And Lena's nodding to all of that.
I think there's also, I mean, something that's been really interesting is we've coached a few people to make the move from south of the border up here, and they're quite horrified about the kind of restrictive nature of the Scottish interview system. And actually it's something that we are thinking about how we maybe can have a bit more power in feeding that back, because it's not an interview system that particularly is helpful to people with any protected characteristics. It's very much still about scoring, it's still about tick boxes, and I would say it's still quite old-fashioned, and that's something we've maybe felt, but actually people coming in from outside have sort of said, wow, how do I approach this interview? So we've done a bit of coaching around that, but actually it's about, well, should we be coaching around it, or should we be telling the people that actually this isn't really good enough anymore? So there's some work there, you know, Vivian, I think.
Fabulous opportunity to disrupt. Absolutely, and innovate and change. You just have to keep chipping away at it with all those influential people that you're connected with across Scotland in your ways. Fabulous. What do you think, Lisa?
Well, as I put in the chat, Scotland's my favorite place to visit, and I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but the Scottish accent just makes my heart putter and pitter. But but the geography challenge, right? Scotland certainly doesn't have as many people as Canada, but the geography in terms of distance between networks is something Canada faces and the United States. So I think we have to just move forward and not compare our little networks to like England, for example, where it's all clustered and there's so much population and so much interest. Because I often feel guilty that we don't have as much going, but Canada is the second largest country land-wise, right after Russia. So it's a challenge, and the online forum has helped with that, but there's nothing that replaces face-to-face and cake eating in person. So
and hugging, we said hugging.
Well, yes, I'm not a big hugger, but people make me, which is okay. I should be a hugger, but I loved it. Thank you for the ideas.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Christine, Audrey, Lena, thank you so much and hope you enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Super session there. Super session there, Lisa. Yes, thank you.
Wasn't it
very
good?
much.
That
Yeah.
all of them. There's just so many. The themes of bravery and women coming into their own and affirming what they already knew about themselves because they've heard it in another woman's story. It's just the same thing that just reinforces the need for women ed. It's beautiful.
Beautiful. And I was just picking up that last point from the Scotland team and you in terms of geography. One of the things we always want in our networks is to be as close as possible to where women live and work. So it doesn't, obviously for this, we've got to have a big global Unconference to bring everybody together. But in terms of the regional networks, and that they need to be, I think, focused on really small events that hook up and build on each other to the big national events for the country. I think we do really need the national and the regional events, and regional can be small, you know, geographically small, so that the women in that community are supported and can come together in the same way we all are, and learning and taking so much support from each other, lifting all of us up in that way.
Yeah, every session, every time. It's wonderful.
Wonderful. So you, Lisa, are going to have a break.
A little bit of a break, yes. Yes, and a reminder to those still listening that we have about a half hour. Is that correct, Vivian, I think?
Yes, we come back at 17:30 British Standard Time.
Okay, so time to get something to eat, check other social media, watch some TV, whatever folks need to do, and we'll see you back here in a little bit.
See you at 17:30 British Standard Time. Looking forward to it. Bye.
Bye.